Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku changed Atsushi's Musutafu experience part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. Thank you once again, 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝐵. The officers bow their heads, and the detective just smiles, waving a reassuring hand. No need to thank me. Just doing my job. Atsushi watches them leave the premises and sighs in relief, turning around and looking up at the city around him. It's been less than a week since he was stationed in the city of Musutafu. They were in desperate need of a detective, and Atsushi offered to go in Ranpo's stead, as the older was prioritizing their home first. Besides, his deduction skills have improved quite a lot after some learning from Ranpo, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, even 𝗧𝗏. Thanks to the support from the rest back home, Atsushi was able to be a licensed hero, albeit underground, with his day job being a to-hire detective. Atsushi continues walking down the sidewalk, the sun setting behind him. He was fond of walking, letting him relax but also map out the city better. It was more crowded, closely together with varying sizes of buildings. Musutafu really is different, he murmurs to himself. Turning the corner, Atsushi blinks to see a building. A school. Ahead, some kids hurried out, laughing and shouting behind their shoulders. But at the sight of him, they instantly shut up and ran even faster. Never mind, it's just the same. Atsushi sighs before turning his head, and his eyes widen to see a little boy with green hair, staring down at scorched notebooks and a bag thrown into some water. Atsushi looks around before hurrying over. Hey, he kneels next to them, causing the boy to look at him with a stunned expression, their hands clutching the ends of his sleeve. Atsushi frowns in worry and goes to gather his books. He could just barely feel a hint of heat off their covers. Fire. Shaking his head, he retrieved the bag and knelt in front of the boy. Hey, are you okay? Were those kids bullies of yours? He asks. Silence. Atsushi frowns deeper. Hey, a hiccup. And Atsushi's eyes widened as tears fell from the boy's face as he began crying. He panicked for a second before Atsushi placed the things down and pulled the boy into a hug. 𝐻𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. It's okay, you're going to be okay. He tries, but that only ended up with the boy collapsing into his arms, wailing. Atsushi frowns and sighs carefully. You're going to be okay, kid. Life's hard, I know. It really is. Carefully, he pulled back and brushed the tears off the boy's face, making them look at him. Come on, let's get you a snack. It's still early for some ice cream parlors to be open. How does that sound? He offers with a gentle smile. The boy sniffled before weakly nodding his head. All right, let's go. Atsushi smiles. He put the notebooks in the bag and held it over his shoulder, taking the boy's hand, and they headed out of the open school campus. It was quiet between them at first as Atsushi found an ice cream stand and they opted to eat it at the curb of the road. But he could see them enjoying it, so he waited regardless. Do you think I'm suited? Gone. Atsushi snapped to look at the boy, who he realized was actually a teen, 14 to be exact. Well, that's a heavy question coming from someone your age, Atsushi commented. But I think everyone's life is worth living, he responds. The teen looks at him for a moment. Even without a quirk. Right, Musutafu was drastically different from Yokohama. While Yokohama's ability users are the minority, civilians are the minority in Musutafu, dubbed quirkless. And quirks were seen as someone's worth. Those who don't just fall into the background. People are still people, regardless of any power or not. Atsushi shrugs his shoulders. And no way. People with quirks are everything. The boy shakes his head. But that means that your life isn't worth anything, Atsushi said, looking at him earnestly. And to be honest, I envy you for having no quirk. The teen's eyes widen before his eyebrows furrow. Why? Atsushi smiles and faces the sky. All my life, I always wanted something normal. But I wasn't really given that, even at present. Possibly the only normal thing I have are just the friends I chose to be my family. And the same goes to them. The teen stares at him for a moment before yelping when Atsushi taps his head. And quirkless or not, no one should be subjected to such horrendous acts, no less from your peers. The bullying. It's fine. No, it's not. Atsushi interrupts. Just bullying ever. Again, people are people in my eyes. And people are human in every way. No one should be bullied for just being human, unless the occasion calls for it. The teen's eyes widen at Atsushi, and the older glances back and smiles quietly to see free tears flowing from their face. But it was different from before. Before we get you back home, how about we get you a new bag and some notebooks? Think we're able to salvage what you wrote on those ones? He asks. Wait a second. Are you actually going to get me new notebooks and a bag? Atsushi looks at the teen. Of course. Why shouldn't I? Because I can still use them. I think. The pages of your notebook are practically falling apart. The ends are so singed that they'll crumple into dust, and your bag seems to be holding itself by thread. 𝗧𝗃 looks at his wallet and frowns. At moments like this, he really wishes he saved his salary than using it on crepes for the others. 𝗧𝗃 blinks in surprise as he opens the last pocket. A debit card. He stares for a second before sighing, shaking his head. 𝗵𝗃. Are you sure? The teen asks, standing up. Sure, I'm sure. Besides, your other things in your bag are likely destroyed because of the water. Ah, I completely forgot all about that. 𝗧𝗃 chuckles at the boy. Then let's hurry and get to those stores before they close. The teen stares at him with sparkling eyes before smiling. Okay. 𝗧𝗃 smiles at the younger and they start heading off. Oh wait, introductions. I'm Midoriya Izuku, Nakajima 𝗧𝗃. From that day on, 𝗧𝗃 would finish any work he had before going to meet up with Midoriya. If it was instinct to protect the boy, then so be it. But even then, the teen really is a light of his own, quite determined to become a hero even without a quirk, self-conscious in his own ability, which 𝗧𝗃 can relate well with, and just overall a very bright kid. And hella smart. At this point I can bring you along during the job and they'd think you're the detective between us two. 𝗧𝗃 utters, staring at the notebooks filled to the brim. You're a detective. Midoriya blinks in surprise, looking up from his work. Yup, you likely figured this out, but I'm not from around Musutafu. One of my seniors was asked to come over here for a while to help with small cases that heroes don't look at. But because he's most needed back home, I offered to come here. 𝗧𝗃 leans back on the chair of Midoriya's home, staring at the ceiling. I'm not as good as him, though. I still have a long way to go. Well, I think you're already there. Midoriya smiles and 𝗧𝗃 looks at him curiously. During the times I do see you at work, you're always so serious. Your judgment is spot on. And you always manage to bring justice to those harmed. 𝗧𝗃 stares at the boy before smiling quietly and ruffled his hair. You really are something, Midoriya. So the HPSC, the Hero Public Safety Commission, are responsible for newly licensed heroes but also the general public? 𝗧𝗃 asks, reading one of Midoriya's notebooks. Sort of. They're the ones that make the laws for heroes and the society to coexist in the city. He explains. 𝗧𝗃 tilts his head, continuing to read. How far can they go, do you think? No clue. From what I've heard last, they could go all the way to America but have no access to certain parts that deliberately disagree with the commission. But I don't get why, though. 𝗧𝗃 hums quietly, looking through. Apologies if this sounds blunt, but they sound suspicious. He comments. I guess. Midoriya tilts his head. 𝗧𝗃 sighs, shaking his head. He wasn't told to investigate them, just stationed to help the police force. There's a whole lot I need to know about this. Their laws especially, or else I could get in trouble. 𝗧𝗃 looks at him. Think they have a law book somewhere around here? Midoriya blinks before laughing. Well, there's gotta. Come on, let's go see if they do. You want me to train him? 𝗧𝗃 stares in shock at 𝗏𝗏. The Midoriya sitting on the opposite side of the table from him. More like I give you permission, she elaborates. You're a kind young man, Nakajima-san. I can tell that my son began looking up to you as a role model, possibly alongside All Might. Such high regards, then. He chuckles and 𝗏𝗏 smiles. You see, Izuku always wanted to become a hero just like All Might. But ever since discovering he's quirkless, he practically shut down until he met you. She slides a paper to him, and 𝗧𝗃 picks it up to see that it was an entrance exam to a high school, UA High School. UA High School. Midoriya info dumped this on me some time ago. 𝗧𝗃 recalls. They're regarded as the #1 ranked high school for heroics, right? That's right. 𝗏𝗏 smiles. Izuku wants to try and get into their heroics course, even though he's quirkless. His mindset changed drastically. From it being a one-way road to get into the course, he'll just be overjoyed in the fact that he can just attend UA High School. 𝗧𝗃 blinks in surprise and looks at the flyer. Heroes, general education, support, and management. All things that Midoriya-san can handle himself. He thinks quietly for a moment and glances at the other. She seemed quite nervous. He looks at the clock. It's a few minutes late from when Midoriya returns home. He smiles. You know that he can just come up to me and ask me to train him. I would have agreed in a heartbeat regardless. He smiles. Almost instantly the door into the living room slammed open. Really? Midoriya exclaims, eyes sparkling. Caught you. 𝗧𝗃 taps the boy's forehead and smiles. Of course. I just need to call Fukuzawa-san and see if we can extend my stay here, maybe indefinitely. He says. Midoriya's eyes sparkled and he hugged 𝗧𝗃, who chuckled, hugging him back. Extend your stay. Fukuzawa blinks in surprise. 𝗧𝗃 nods his head at the figure on the screen of the video call. I have been doing my job, yes, but needless to say, I've met some quite exciting people. I want to stay for a bit longer to help them personally. He explains. Of course, Musutafu is in great need of detectives, but do come back to visit. Fukuzawa said. I know. 𝗧𝗃 chuckles. Or we can visit you, 𝗧𝗃-kun. Dazai sings. You still have work to do. Atsushi smiles with a hidden aura of intimidation. Awa, come on now, Atsushi-kun. It's not every day we can visit such a heroic city, smiles the bandages brunette. Atsushi flinches when chaos suddenly erupted by Kunikida and Chuga. Why the executive was there at the agency? Well, given the time, it was likely closing hour. New faces appear on the screen, and Atsushi smiles at the sight of Kyoyuka, Sigma, and Lucy. Please take care of yourself, Atsushi-san. Sigma smiles. Don't worry, I will. And bring back souvenirs for us. I'll keep it in mind. Call us every night. You hear, Tiger Cat? Expect our nightly video calls, then. Turning his attention back to Fukuzawa, he bowed his head. The president simply smiled and nodded his head back. Atsushi waved, leaving them to their mess, and sighed as the video call ended. Quite some energetic folks of yours, Smiles and Co. No, just as I said. My mentor. Atsushi sighed, glanced away. He can be a pain in the workplace, especially to his husband. Are you, too? Midoriya tilts his head. I'm the one that either is dragged into his shenanigans or is the victim alongside Kunikida-san. Atsushi sighs and shakes his head. But hey, I've extended my stay indefinitely. Does that mean we can train tomorrow? Midoriya's eyes sparkled. Maybe. Have you finished your homework? Yup, then we can. Atsushi was supposed to stay in Musutafu for a small amount of time, to help with an investigation that's taken much longer than it should. But the investigation coming to a close with justice in the right place. He is off a job until his assistance is needed by the police or someone personally calls for his expertise. But until then, come on, Nakajima-san. Dinner's ready. Haha, on it. He's got someone to guide. Kakin, give it back. Atsushi perks his head up at the sound. He walks over to the clearing where he and Midoriya have been training, only to see Midoriya reaching out to a notebook that a spiky blonde-haired boy was holding up. Others around as they began playing catch with it, Midoriya trying his hardest to get it back. Instantly Atsushi's eyes widened and he growled. Who's to stop me, Deku? Mocked the other, and he tossed it to one of their friends. Before they could catch it, Atsushi grabbed it and looked at them with fierce tiger eyes staring at them as his tiger features began slipping, along with his clawed hands. And Nakajima-san, Midoriya utters, staring at the man and his lashing tail and airplane ears. Atsushi silently gave him back the notebook and looked at Rest with a growl. They flinched at that, stepping back somewhat. Wait, don't. It's fine, Nakajima-san. Midoriya stammers, flailing his hands. The man stayed silent, the only thing coming from his mouth being the ominous growl of a predator looking at their prey. But after a moment, Atsushi huffs as his ears lowered in defiance. Get out of here, he glared. Instantly the kids turned tail and ran, one pausing to look back before running. Midoriya hugged tightly to the notebook, keeping his gaze to the ground, before he gasped when Atsushi hugged him. The older takes in a deep breath to calm himself down, almost falling limp as his features vanish. I wanted to punch their faces so hard, but then I would be charged with assault, he grumbles. Midoriya looks on guiltily. You didn't have to stand up for me, Nakajima-san. But I wanted to. Atsushi lets go and they sit down. I've been bullied all my life, Midoriya. I don't want you to go through that. Midoriya weakly smiled and looked at the notebook in his hand. Whatever they told you before I came here, ignore them. We're going to get you into UA High School, no matter what. If it's in one of those other departments or the heroics course, you're getting in. Atsushi stands up and holds a hand to him. So what do you say, kid? Wanna get in? Midoriya lets out a battle cry as he swings an arm, only for Atsushi to sidestep back. Fighting isn't as easy as going in head first and throwing punches, Midoriya, Atsushi comments with a light chuckle. Rog, another dodge, or as simple as a cat fight. Ducking just barely. Spotting the opportunity, Atsushi sweeps his leg right under the boy's feet, causing Midoriya to stumble onto his back. He gasped for breath, his entire body sore. How did you do it? Midoriya panted as Atsushi knelt down next to him. Believe me, kid, I went through the same trial and error process as you are doing right now. Atsushi takes Midoriya's hand and helps him sit up, which is mostly me being grabbed and thrown around like a ragdoll from both Kunikida-san and Ryunosuke. Midoriya shudders at that. But other than that, I'm not going to throw you over my shoulder. Yet, I might end up breaking you. Atsushi nervously smiles. Why, you won't break me? Shakes the boy's head. Oh, I definitely will. Atsushi looks down at his hand. It's a passive, but I have quite the strength. Not as much as Kenji-kun's though. Midoriya looks at him in curiosity. What is your quirk, Nakajima-san? Atsushi stares at him for a moment and thinks for a moment. The next, it's a secret. You gotta achieve friendship level 5 to figure it out, he cheekily grins, his ametrine sunset eyes glinting in mischief, followed by Midoriya letting out a pain groan. Alright, up and at him, Midoriya. Atsushi takes Midoriya's hand and helps each other up. Now come on, how about we have another go? This time, you try dodging. Midoriya blinks in panic before yelling out from a flying punch. So you're a detective, but mainly you go on the front lines of some sort of conflict. Midoriya tilts his head, resting his soda as the two of them sit beside a vending machine in a nearby alley, taking a break from training almost all day. Yup, Atsushi brings up his canned tea for a drink before resuming. Back then, I was more or less a clueless sheltered kid that never interacted with the city for 18 years straight. To be thrust into a world of such, along with my quirk, was a bit overwhelming. But you still pulled through, right? With the right people, that I did. He smiles. Is it the people you call each night? Every now and then. It was late. Most of them had gone to sleep. Atsushi explains. They seem to really admire you, the last few you spoke with. Midoriya smiles. Atsushi blinks and thinks about it for a while before smiling. I suppose that makes sense. I saved them from their previous predicament. 𝗂𝐢𝐫, from drowning in the darkness of the port mafia back in bygone years. Lucy, a change of heart amidst the pandemic of the guild that was his supposed bounty. Sigma, getting the young man generated from the book to realize his life's worth, even for that moment before falling. It felt like ages to see him again, to see him alive. And Ryunosuke, his husband, see beyond his pushed morality of killing to see his initial worth, to protect. Midoriya looks at Atsushi before smiling. Makes sense. You're someone people can look up to. Atsushi opens his eyes and looks at the teen who smiled at him. I look up to you. Silence. Kid, you're going to make me cry. Sorry. A written exam to enter UA and a practical exam for the heroics course. Atsushi inquires, the pair now dancing in the sense of their sparring. The kid has been getting good with their training, and going to the gym seemed to do a bit of wonders. Yeah, the written exam is a must. I can do that no problem. But the practical might be hard. I could imagine, without a quirk. Atsushi hums in agreement, ducking from a well-aimed punch in the gut and ducked to sweep his foot behind Midoriya's feet. The boy jumped in accordance, making Atsushi smirk as he pushed himself back in almost a backflip, catching himself on his feet, and they resumed their dance. I suppose I can agree, thinking about it. Ever had to fight the embodiment of your own quirk? With or without your quirk? The quirk becomes sentient from yourself, so without. All right, that sounds terrifying. Midoriya shuddered before quickly dodging a kick from Atsushi. Let me tell you, kid, if there is but a hint of green mist and you have a quirk, get ready for a long night of a lifetime. Atsushi waves a hand and just dodges Midoriya's fist, spotting the opening. He grabs the teen's wrist and headbutts the other's stomach, causing Midoriya to go right over his shoulder and land on his back, groaning. A trick from yours truly, 𝗂𝐚𝐲. Atsushi beams, letting go and clapping his hands together. A trick he used on you? Midoriya asks, looking up at him. Numerous times. Atsushi responds with a grimace. But thankfully it's a thing you pick up once it's done to you several times over. Atsushi wouldn't be surprised if 𝗧𝗏 knew that trick if he were to take a defense route rather than taking offense or no longer human out of one. Happy early 15th birthday, Midoriya-kun. Atsushi smiles, clapping his hands together. Oh, thank you, Midoriya exclaims. Atsushi-san, will you be staying for his birthday by chance? 𝗏𝗏 inquires. I'll try. But someone I know has the same birthday back home. Atsushi explains as 𝗏𝗏 returns to the table with dinner. I'll likely be gone for half the day to catch up with everyone and celebrate their birthday. But I'll be here for the rest of the day. Why, you don't have to. We can save you some cake the day after. You should stay with your folks for the day. Midoriya says. Are you sure? Atsushi frowns in worry. Yeah, I'm sure. Atsushi gazes at the boy for a moment before sighing. Well, at least be there when I get on the train back home, then. All right. He smiles. I will. Midoriya grins. We both will, nods 𝗏𝗏. Atsushi smiles before clapping his hands together. Itadakimasu. And on the train ride back to Yokohama, Atsushi pulls out his phone and brings it up to his ear. Jinko, hey, Ryunosuke, mind if I can bother you and the others for something? Atsushi asks. He couldn't forget the ecstatic expression on Midoriya's face at the barrage of presents Atsushi returned the day after his birthday, ranging from various books, pieces of clothing, and charms and little fidget toys, and Atsushi's personal present, a small scrapbook of the boy, majority being himself, few with the two of them and including 𝗏𝗏. It was sudden when the ground began shaking. It was slight at first, something that even Midoriya didn't even pick up, but Atsushi did. Quickly Atsushi grabbed Midoriya, and they jumped away just in time from a fallen flower pot. Whoa, Midoriya exclaims, looking up only to catch another earthquake. He panics as people begin running around. No, this is something different. Atsushi shakes his head. Midoriya looks around before panicking. Everything's shaking. Midoriya, the young teen looks at him. I need you to take people away from the buildings. Bring them to the streets if you have to. I need to find something. Before Midoriya could respond, he was let down and Atsushi bolted. He blinks before whipping around to see a piece of concrete fall from one of the buildings. He shouts out and runs across the way, punching it back. Get to safety, stay on the streets. Go onto the streets, he shouts, ushering them off and motioning those nearby. Stay off the sidewalks. Don't stand, sit down. It felt like hours, but Midoriya felt the ground ease. He looked around, watching carefully, until the shaking completely stopped. Midoriya sighs in relief and looks around to see Atsushi standing off to the side. "Nakajima-san," Midoriya exclaims. The young man looks up and smiles in greeting at the teen who ran up to them and knelt down to look at the boy. "Who's this?" he inquires. "This is our little shaker," Atsushi smiles. Midoriya blinks and looks at the boy curiously. "How did you figure that out?" "Quite a few factors," responds Atsushi. "But for now, we should leave the premises." Midoriya blinks and looks behind him to see that heroes have arrived at the scene and taken the damage. "Should we take him to the heroes, though?" Midoriya asks. The boy freezes in Atsushi's arms, and the man frowns. "No, not until we find his parents. Then we could see if we want to or not." Midoriya stares at him and looks over his shoulder before turning back and hurried after them. It didn't take long before they found the boy's parents, who were just as relieved to see him as they were ecstatic to realize he has a quirk. Midoriya watched the parents and the boy as Atsushi spoke with them, and they seemed quite serious in what the detective had to say. At the end of their conversation, the parents smiled at their son, who was just beaming. "So what happened?" Midoriya asks as Atsushi returns to his side once the parents and their child left. The little one panicked because he lost track of his parents. In the midst of his growing panic attack, that seemed to kick in his quirk manifestation, which caused that massive earthquake. Atsushi explains. "Thankfully, I managed to calm him down, and by then the shaking stopped. Hopefully, with the right support and training, he could be just like his parents." "How?" "Both his parents are in the medical field, and he wants to be just like them. If he could manage to control the outlet of shaking he distributes, he could be very helpful when it comes to shaking therapy." Midoriya stares before his eyes sparkle. "You think of everything. I just wish for that boy the best life," assures Atsushi. With a quiet sigh, who knew what they were going to do with that poor boy when they realized he was the cause of that earthquake? "I informed his parents about it, and they'll be cautious and do everything they can to help him." Midoriya blinks before smiling. "You're a good person, Nakajima-san." Atsushi just smiles and rests a hand on his head. "We all try to be, Midoriya-kun." Atsushi stood next to Midoriya before the gates into the high school. Even though he was standing next to the boy, he could feel the other's stress radiating off him. "Hey," Midoriya whips his head to look at him in panic. "You'll do great. But what if I don't get through the practical exam?" Midoriya asks, panicking. "Midoriya Izuku." The boy straightens and looks at Atsushi, who smiles at him. "Just do what your gut tells you to do. Remember our training, do your best, and help others. Don't let the fact that you have no quirk be a hindrance to your performance." Atsushi reaches out and rests a hand on the boy's head. "Because right now, you need to go all out. So no holding back, kid." Midoriya lifts his head to look at Atsushi before hugging him, shocking the others. Slowly, Atsushi brought his arms to hug him back and chuckled. "When this is all done, I'll be right here at the entrance waiting for you." Midoriya lets go and nods his head. All right, I'll be off, then." Atsushi nods his head and waves to him as the boy runs past the school gates, only to slip on a pebble. But before a heavy hit to the ground, he found himself floating. "Are you okay?" a girl asks, looking at him. Midoriya just blinks before rapidly nodding his head. "Why, yes," he squeaks. The other smiles in relief and releases her quirk, letting him fall gently. "All right, good luck." She smiles and heads off. Atsushi watches the scene before chuckling. "Midoriya," he calls. "Why, yes," the boy stammers, voice cracking. "What's that saying you folks do when saying good luck?" he asks. Midoriya stares. "Plus ultra." Atsushi grins. "Plus ultra, kid. Do you think he'll get in, Atsushi-kun?" 𝐒𝐭𝐲 asks, preparing a big dinner. "No doubt that he can get in. But there's always the nagging in the back of my head if he can or can't get into the hero course," Atsushi says. "I did all I can to prepare him for the practical exam. All we can do is hope and pray that he's able to get into UA." 𝐒𝐭𝐲 looks at him before smiling. "Thank you for believing in my son," she smiles. Atsushi blinks before smiling back. "Someone's gotta help out." Atsushi quietly stared at Midoriya, who was all but panicking. It's been a week since the entrance exam. From what Atsushi had heard, many were shocked to be informed that Midoriya, even after managing to kick down and destroy a few robotic villains, ran headfirst into saving one of the other participants that was hurt badly in the events of an arena trap with a robot closing in on them. Surprisingly enough, it was the girl that saved him from falling. But there was something missing from that information that they thought was normal, but not Atsushi. "You really have to calm down, Midoriya-kun," Atsushi comments with a chuckle. "Easy villain robots, yes, subdued medium ones, but my practical exam overshadows my written one because I didn't get across the line. But you managed to help that girl from the robot," Atsushi reminds him. "And she in turn saved you from getting a concussion when you landed." Midoriya just grumbles, sitting back down. "I am just worried that I won't get in because of..." Atsushi frowns and sighs. Something's definitely going through that boy's head and he's not saying it. And glancing at 𝐒𝐭𝐲, she looked somewhat confused at her son. He's hiding something from him. Are schools for those without a quirk? Yes, Atsushi inquires, taking to changing the subject to get his mind off the impending results. Yes, but they're fewer when compared to quirk schools, 𝐭 says, resting some food in front of her son. Atsushi hums before perking up. Something's at the door. The two look at him before now hearing something enter the slot of their door. Ah, it's here. It's here. The two panic. Atsushi just looked at them before taking pity and went to pick it up. He looks at it in a bit of confusion as he returns back to the main living room. This isn't like any sort of acceptance letter, he comments. But at the same time, my joining the agency wasn't normal either. He holds the letter to Midoriya, smiling. You can look at it in your room. Me and your mother would be right outside. Midoriya stares before sucking in a deep breath and takes the letter. Upon the boy returning to his room, 𝐭 quietly paced back and forth while Atsushi sucked in a deep breath, praying to 𝗂𝗲𝗄𝐏, hell, the book, even, that the boy got in. Taking a deep breath, he rests a hand on 𝐭's shoulder and the other looks at him. Atsushi-kun. Atsushi takes another breath and closes his eyes, concentrating on the voices inside. He recognizes Midoriya's breath, quiet and shallow. Did he? And more voices. Give. Her points to him. The girl he saved. He continued listening before his eyes widened. He got in, he whispers. What? 𝐭 whips her head to look at him. I got in, Midoriya cries, bursting out of his room with tears in his eyes. Oh, Izuku. 𝐭 cried and hugged her son. Atsushi lets out a sigh of relief, smiling. What a relief, he whispers to himself. Suddenly he felt a hand on each wrist, and looked back to the pair smiling at him. Before he knew it, he was pulled into the hug. Thank you, sensei, Midoriya whispers. Atsushi blinks, and he couldn't help but scream in panic. Sensei, I feel old now. Wait, do you really see me like that? The two devolved into laughter at the sight of the man as he now was rethinking his entire life. You actually got into the hero course, Midoriya-kun. Atsushi stares in shock. Yeah, I sort of forgot to mention that. Midoriya frantically glanced away, his stance faltering but quickly pulling himself back in the sparring match. I got my quirk. Atsushi pauses, looking at the kid in confusion. Was that what you were worried about telling me the day you got your acceptance letter? Don't you kids manifest a quirk when you're 4? That's more than a decade late for you, mister. Better late than never. Atsushi blinks before sighing fondly. Well, at least you're looking at the positives. After a few dodges and a swing on his leg, Midoriya finds himself flat on his stomach, grumbling. But still not enough for you to knock me off my feet, he teases, walking off and dodging the boy's swinging legs as a last-ditch effort. Atsushi looks at the boy's schedule, humming quietly. 8:25 to 15:10 in general seems fair enough. Probably better than other school schedules. He murmurs under his breath. That makes me wonder, actually. Have you ever been to school, Atsushi-san? 𝐭 asks. Atsushi instantly looked away, a tight smile on his face. Ahaha, oh, would you look at the time. I have to catch the train and head back home, he deflects. You've never been to school. Midoriya gawks. Look, I have a good explanation. Atsushi waves a hand, facing the two. There aren't many places that let people like me to have a stable education in a safe environment since I bring danger with my quirk. Or just existing. I only know up to my multiplications. And who knows what about history and all the other stuff. I've tried picking it up again, for the sake of being an adult and that one of my coworkers used to be a math teacher. He waves his hands. But enough of me. You're in the hero course, Midoriya-kun. I know. The teen smiles brightly. Don't push yourself too hard or you'll end up collapsing on yourself. Atsushi reminds him with a smile, handing him back the schedule. And please don't get into too much trouble now. You make it sound like I attract danger, commented Midoriya sheepishly. I'm a danger magnet myself, so I'm being a hypocrite. Atsushi shrugs his shoulders and the pair share a grin before digging into dinner. Atsushi really shouldn't have said that. Because from a peaceful conversation with Sigma, Lucy, and Kaiuka on a video call in his own apartment, he was now whisked away to investigate something else. No less 3 days into UAS academic year, Atsushi sighed heavily and resumed looking at the gate. There are numerous stories airing as of currently, but one thing stays true. Reporters trespassed into campus and thoroughly raided the place. What a way to start a year, he sighs in defeat. He stares at the gate, frowning. There's no way reporters would go so far to destroy the gate. Atsushi closes his eyes in thought, a hand on his hip and the other on his chin. None of the reporters have quirks that could do this much damage, either. Atsushi opens his eyes and looks at the school building. Why would reporters even be here in the first place? 3 days later, Atsushi rubs his face with a heavy groan. What do you think, Nakajima-san? He turns his head to someone in what could be best described as an astronaut suit. Space Hero, 13. Also known as a non-Kuros, pro hero and also staff of the school as their rescue training specialist. Things aren't adding up, he says for starters. Comparing the damage on the gate and the quirks of the reporters, none fit the case. I also got a second opinion from one of my folks. This is something else and definitely not as simple as picking a lock. Atsushi turns back to the building. The school's security is too high-tech for something as simple as picking a lock to be its downfall. Are you saying that there's another party involved? 13 inquires. Atsushi frowns heavily. I wish I could say it's not, but it's a possibility, he says. Not to mention the fact the news reporters were here in the first place. Is this a normal occurrence? No, this is new. 13 Look at the damage of the gate. Seems like we need to upgrade our security. I'll talk to my folks and see if they're able to give you any help on that, Atsushi says, and 13 nods his head. For now, everything's in the air. I just hope those students of yours don't spread random rumors. Apologies, Nakajima-san, but this is a high school, and from the looks of it, they're watching us right now. Atsushi blinks and turns his head. His tiger eyes flashed, and with just a mere squint, he saw many students out in the halls watching out the windows as teachers hurriedly corralled them into rooms. Damn, he huffed. What do you suggest we do for now? 13 asks. Well, take care of this gate and update your security. And for you to do that, you would need to send the students home early. Atsushi pulls out his phone. I'll contact my folks for an updated security. Is that all right with you? Yes, thank you. Atsushi nods his head and watches the hero head back into campus and to a small group of others standing just outside the doors, likely staff as well. Atsushi turns attention back to the phone call. It rings once, twice. Yeah, we saw the news, kid. Teruko's voice answers before Atsushi could say a word. I would likely speak to you about this sort of stuff in private, so get ready for that video call with the others. Got it. Anyways, do you think you'll help them update their security? Atsushi asks. Of course. Me and Deku are currently looking into their security, and after speaking with the rest, we'll send you the file. Around 15. Sounds good. Teruko asks. Atsushi turns his head to look at 13, who turned back. He held up a hand and flagged it 3 times. She holds a thumbs up. Good. Thank you again, Teruko-san. No biggie, kid. Just make sure those kids return home safely. Atsushi nods his head and hangs up. He looks over to see the group of staff walking up to him. My folks are looking into what can be improved for your security and would send me the form at 50. For now, it's best we let the kids head back home and fix this gate of yours, Atsushi says. Are you sure? We can still continue classes. One asked. After that fiasco, I bet that those kids won't focus and just be gossiping. Atsushi denies, waving a hand. And because of the situation, I'm worried they'll make up crazy rumors that some might think are real and cause them to be even more restless. I see your point. Then we shall inform the parents of the students about this, unless they've already seen from the news alone then, Ravenite said with a sigh. Atsushi nods his head. As the staff leave, Atsushi turns his head to stare at the gate. A third party. Could it be possible? He closes his eyes. Surprised they did take our advice, Jano remarks. Atsushi just sighs, leaning back on the side of the couch. Well, they don't know that when I say folks I meant the hunting dogs of Yokohama. But that's just a whole other deal to begin with. Atsushi waves a hand. Then what's gotten you in such a tizzy, dear Atsushi-kun? Dazai smiles. It's about that gate and the reporters. Atsushi responds, folding his arms across his chest. The thought about there being a possible third party might be what had happened. None of those reporters should have managed to destroy it like it was. Quite, hums Dazai. Seems like you're on the right track. Ranpo muses. But there's still something missing in this equation. Atsushi frowned heavily and closed his eyes in thought, thinking. Without realizing, his ears and tail popped out, flicking irritably. Is it a cover-up? Atsushi asks, opening his eyes. Ding ding ding. The whole fiasco of the news reporters was all but a distraction from the real thing. Which means that this third party could be a bigger deal than we're all initially thinking. Then, Atsushi frowns heavily. But just what? He whispers. Atsushi stares at the ceiling, not knowing that he has been repeatedly clicking his pen. At the sound of a tink of glass, he snapped his head forward to see 𝐭 smiling warmly. Here, you should eat, she urges. Atsushi stares before sighing heavily and nodding his head. He rested the pen on the table and picked up the spoon. I suppose what happened yesterday is still on your mind, isn't it? She smiles quietly. Yeah, he nods his head. I'm just right at the tip, I know it. But something is missing, something I don't know that could get the entire thing to just click. 𝐭 just barely saved his meal as Atsushi slams his face on the table. And it's annoying me so much. 𝐭 frowns in worry before perking up, her attention drawn somewhere. Atsushi looks up at her in confusion before hearing the sound of the news. He turns around to look at the television screen that's been on for background noise. Isn't that? 𝐭 whispers, eyes widening at the sight of the building. USJ. Atsushi utters. He didn't even let his phone ring once as he answered the call. I see the news. I'll lend my assistance and head to the location. Any policemen that are nearby head to the location and be on standby. If there are heroes in the area, they are to engage in combat. If not, bide them time. He looks at 𝐭, who nods her head. and he nods back before rushing out the door. Just as he did, his arms and legs changed to that of a tiger's, ears pressed against his head and tail lashing behind him. As his feet hit the edge of the balcony edge, he boosts himself off, eyes trained on the high school building on the hilltop. What he didn't expect was to get there quicker than he expected. An accidentally drop kick would be described as monstrous. Atsushi's tiger eyes stared at the thing for that split second. He kicked off the thing and instantly it felt wrong. He skids onto the ground and grits his teeth into a growl. Nakajima-san. Atsushi looks over to see Midoriya there, eyes wide. Midoriya-kun, get your classmates to safety. Me and your teachers will take care of this, he shouts. But you want help, watch out. Atsushi looked back in time and jumped over a swing from the thing, and promptly kicked it back. But all it did was stagger. It was much more resistant than it meets the eye. I mean it. Get to safety, all of you. Atsushi shouts over his shoulder. We want to help. The other heroes haven't arrived, and some of us are down for the count. Don't you need permission from heroes to even fight, kid? Atsushi asks. You can give us permission, one of his classmates shouted. Atsushi grits his teeth and looks at one of the staff members who was glaring at the things around them. Fine, but stay in groups, problem children. Yes, Mr. Aizawa. Atsushi frowned heavily inside. This is going to be a disaster. It was all a mess in the end. Atsushi, somewhat battered, but the wounds he did get were already being negated thanks to Byako. He stood there as the policemen took away the thing, who he realized was something called a Namu. And some of the villains and small thugs that also assisted in their help were also under their custody. What is going on? Atsushi whispers under his breath. It was all a blur, his body going into autopilot as he more or less followed the students back, Midoriya staying with him out of worry as Atsushi continued thinking. He didn't even realize he was brought to their principal's office. He was too deep in his thoughts. This has to do with what happened yesterday. The reporters were a distraction of what was actually happening, which led to the kids meeting the villains here. But how did they know? Do they have someone on the inside telling them all this in real time? No, that can't be it. Right? Atsushi's tail lashed. A third party is definitely involved if I were to take that route. So, to humor the idea, they were the ones that broke the gate at the school. The reporters just found that as an opportunity for their greatest scoop and raided the place, meaning that for the villains to find out where they were going, they would have to know the kids' school schedule. Atsushi opens his eyes. The incident yesterday was all but just a distraction for someone to grab the hero kids' school schedule of the week or something and plan their attack. They saw an opening and bitten the bullet the next day, which is today. But that also means there's definitely a third party involved. No less someone in the same crowd as the kids and giving the villains insider intel. Atsushi sat there before covering his face with his tiger hands and, rightfully, screamed. I don't know if I should feel proud of myself that I managed to deduce what's going on or terrified of what's going to happen next. Is this how Dazai-sen feels? You managed to figure out what has happened. Atsushi pulls his hands away from his face to realize where he was, just quietly sitting on the ground. He stares at a talking white rat in a suit. Am I dreaming? He asked dumbly. I would hope you're not, smiles the other. Atsushi just blinks and looks around wildly. You're in my office back at UA High School. The kids from USJ have returned to their classroom and are being looked after by their homeroom teacher until further notice. I'm Principal Nezu. The rat continues. Atsushi stares before quickly picking himself up, dispelling his ability. He bowed his head. And Nakajima Atsushi, an underground hero and detective. I've been stationed here from my hometown by my superior, and got called regarding this situation since I was here yesterday about the break-in. Atsushi introduces himself. So a foreigner to our city. Yes, I am. Atsushi deflates slightly. You seem quite close to one of our students, Midoriya Izuku. I've heard quite the deeds you've done to help the boy during his young adolescence before UA. The rat, Nezu, continues. Well, not really, I just helped the kid out. Atsushi waves his hands. But even then, he looks up to you, right alongside his other trainer. Nezu insists. Atsushi blinks for a moment before sighing, knowing that he can't get an answer from them. It would practically be the same as him trying to convince Dazai-sen to do his own work, talking to a wall. Anyways, what have you managed to figure out? Nezu inquires. In regards to the incident today and yesterday, sir. The news reporters. Yes. Atsushi nods his head. So it's a possibility that there is a third party involved with the villains, but amidst our students and staff here in UA. Nezu continues. It's possible his phone buzzes, and Atsushi pulls it out to see it being a single text from Ranpo. Yes, it's confirmed. My apologies, sir. Nezu hums in thought before nodding his head. Thank you for the assistance, Nakajima. Atsushi just nodded his head before relaxing his shoulders and hugged himself. Nezu, sir, are the kids all right? He asks, worried. The principal blinks. I sort of tuned myself out completely. I should have at least made sure they were okay and not hurt before delving into my thoughts back at USJ. Nezu stares before smiling. They're all safe, no need to worry. Even when you were in your thoughts, it seemed that you still made sure they all returned here safe and sound. That's good. Atsushi sighs in relief. Guess that security system was a bust after all. He frowns. No, it did a great deal for us. I must thank your folks of the hunting dogs. Atsushi stiffens slightly, but Nezu continues as he jumps down from his chair. The villains managed to infiltrate through one of their quirks. So like a teleportation quirk. Great. Yes, but thankfully that villain with the teleportation quirk has been apprehended thanks to you. Atsushi blinks before humming quietly, nodding his head. That's a relief. Hopefully that means no more break-ins and surprise attacks. He lets out a weak chuckle and Nezu simply smiles. You seem quite exhausted, though. You should return home. Atsushi nodded his head and stood up before yelping when something was tossed at him. Also, please give these to your friends of the hunting dogs, if you may. A simple request. Nezu beams. Atsushi just stares for a moment before nodding his head. Why yes, sir. By heli. Atsushi furrows his eyebrows, looking at the document in one hand and his phone on the other. Yup. Unfortunately, he caught us in a bit of trouble, but thankfully we were accepted at a rescheduled meeting at another date at our earliest convenience. But since we'll be staying here for a day or two, mind if we can crash at your current place, Tiger? Taruko's voice rings. I don't mind. Also, would I be in trouble? Why would you? Because I'm practically lying about having a quirk. And no one should even know the existence of abilities. Atsushi lifts his head to look at the sunset skies. We'll likely smooth things out with the principal. Jouno's voice could be heard in the background. If he's anything like Dazai or Ranpo, he would likely already know. Your connection being the biggest flag. Atsushi sheepishly smiles. Nakajima-san. Atsushi turns his head to see three figures, one being Midoriya. The other two, he remembered, were his classmates Uraraka and Ada. Oh, I have to go. Atsushi said. All right, we'll likely crash at your place tonight. Keep a lookout, cat. I'm a tiger, nada. Atsushi snapped his jaw shut as Taruko happily hung up, and defeatedly put his phone away with a grumble before looking at the kids with a strained smile. Hey, kids. He blinks at the stuff they were carrying. What's all that we're so sorry? Atsushi stared in surprise as the bags of food were shoved up to his face. Huh, he blinked owlishly. For insisting we fight against those villains earlier today. Midoriya looks at him, lowering the bags with a frown. Aren't you angry? Atsushi stares at him and looks at the other three with him. He smiles quietly and kicks himself onto his feet from sitting on the bench. I'm not going to punish you for wanting to do the right thing, even though it would lead to some legal problems. Atsushi pauses and thinks for a second. It's always laws and politics, huh? Would I fall under that jurisdiction? Yeah, probably. I have a hero license. He shakes his head and turns back to the kids, lowering their backs. Besides, you kids would have been collateral damage of sitting ducklings. We needed all the help we could to deal with the situation to bide time. Atsushi smiles. So I'm rather proud of you kids. But please don't do it again, you hear? Their eyes sparkled instantly. Yes, sir. Please don't call me that. You're going to make me sound more older than I actually am. How old are you, then? Atsushi blinks and side glances away, calculating in his head. 20. No wait, that's the age I got married. 22. I'm 22. So young, exclaims Uraraka. Instantly his face rushes red. What's that supposed to mean? Sports festival? Even after the break-in and the villain attack? Atsushi gawks, trying to understand things. It's stupid, yes. Jouno agrees as Deku stands next to him reading the documents. But unfortunately, they insist on this. Makes you wonder if they care about the safety of their students or just their public reputation. Taruko huffs. Guess that explains why you are suddenly here in Musutafu, all of you, he says, looking at the rest of the hunting dogs, Takahara included. Believe me, kid, I'd rather be a safe distance from this city and be back at the Port Mafia building watching on their big screen with everyone else. Takahara laments. Atsushi sheepishly smiles and adds, I hope you're all right with being here. Jouno just frowned heavily while Deku looked at him and quietly patted his shoulder. The faster this sports festival goes, the quicker we can just head back home. Takahara sighs. At least you get to see all this in real time unlike the others. Taruko reminds him with a coo. Let me have my intermission ads, damn it. Takahara screeches. No ads for you, suffer fool. When was Takahara so invested of ads? Atsushi asks, confused. Him, Jin, and Higuchi have an ad bingo card. Jouno responds. Why? They missed you. I don't think I'm someone people would miss. Say that again but to your husband. Atsushi just lets out a wheeze. Atsushi, I need to talk to you about something. Jouno suddenly said. Atsushi blinked before humming and they left the rest in his living room and opted to sit outside on the small balcony. It was quiet at first, the night sky overhead. But even then, it barely holds a candle to Yokohama's nights. Even though you've been here for some time, you've likely never encountered him. Jouno starts. Atsushi looks at him. Who? Endeavor, the #2 hero of Musutafu. Atsushi blinks before instantly covering his face. Not only are there such things as heroes and villains like in those children books, but they're ranked. Ranked for what reason? The flashiest and most powerful quirk. Bullshit. Truly. Atsushi leans back on his chair with a heavy sigh before looking at the other. So why did you bring him up? He asks. 𝗂𝗄 was quiet. He's not a kind man. His only goal is to become the #1 hero, by any means. 𝗂𝗄 turns his attention to the air around them. And before I became a criminal executive in Yokohama's underground, and before I was offered to be with the hunting dogs, I was his son. Unknown to the public but our family because I neither had his or our mother's quirk, and was entirely blind. Atsushi frowned heavily and looked at the city. I had siblings. One of them, if I recall, attends UA. I think I met him. It had a bit of a resemblance. Todoroki Xiaodo, one of Midoriya-kun's friends. Silence. If I ever meet the man, I'll punch him for you. 𝗂𝗄 looks at the other before smiling slightly and rests a hand on his shoulder. As much as I would appreciate that, I would rather do the honors and punch him myself. Who knows, he might have gone rusty. Still gonna punch him. He hurt his kid. Fair enough. After a bit of research and asking Midoriya and his friends some questions, he finally figured out what the sports festival was about and that it was nothing how 𝐭𝐽𝐽 explained it to be. But this is a hero and quirk school. What more different could it get? A yearly tournament where anyone from UAS departments can participate. It's also a way for kids in the hero course to show off their skills for potential internships and or recruitments from pro heroes that will also be watching. Also a chance for those in lower courses to have a shot at entering the hero course. Atsushi swipes Midoriya's phone screen. And for support and business kids to promote their stuff. Fair enough. So like an open house but competition. That's the gist, yeah. Midoriya nods, putting his phone away. But after the villain attack at USJ and the break-in, this is a safety hazard. Deku's voice rang from Atsushi's phone placed on speaker. Of course the kids didn't know they were speaking to the hunting dogs. Just some of Atsushi's family friends that were visiting but were busy. How so? Ada tilts her head, confused. The sports festival will be aired and broadcasted everywhere. 𝗂𝗄 said. And while it's a way for pro heroes to see your potential, it's also a way for villains to figure out your skills, pros and cons. They'll get the upper hand if you were to run into them. Well, you would likely have to go some sort of lightning round on who they are and what their quirk is. Atsushi was a bit relieved that the hunting dogs managed to get acquainted with saying quirk than ability, even though it felt wrong in their mouths. I suppose. But we gotta go all out if we want to receive internships. Midoriya proclaims. At this point, I'm willing to ask the HPSC if I can be a potential hero to send out those internships. Likely just following me around while I do my detective work, but still. Atsushi grumbled, rubbing his face. Unfortunately, it'll be a bit harder than that. You'd need to be a pro hero to offer internships. 𝗂𝗄 explains, unless Tsuruko hums with a lilt in her voice. Atsushi just looked at the phone. 1. Don't do whatever you're planning on doing, which definitely involves 𝗧𝗏 and tethers the line of legality. Secondly, aren't you all late for that rescheduled meeting with Principal Nezu at UA High School? Atsushi asks. Silence other than 𝗂𝗄's exasperated sigh. Shit. No cursing in front of the children, Tsuruko. Sheet. Still worse, but I'll let it slide. Later. Atsushi hangs up and sighs heavily. It's one thing for you to be a foreigner detective, but you have really interesting friends. Uraraka smiles. I suppose, hums Atsushi. Tsuruko, isn't that the name of the new hunting dog's captain? Ida asks. Shit. Theoretically asking, how would you react? Atsushi shoots back. The students all stare at him. Well, they're definitely something, especially since they don't have quirks. Uraraka hums. Aren't the hunting dogs stationed in Yokohama? Midoriya gasped and instantly grabbed his notebook, looking at Atsushi with sparkling eyes. Found a picture, Uraraka exclaims, looking at her phone. The others instantly peered over to take a look while Atsushi shuddered. How old is the picture? He asked slowly. 6 years ago. Atsushi shuddered again and grumbled, leaning away. Well, it's changed. There's only Tsuruko, 𝗂𝗄, Deku, and Takahara. The old captain had some problems. Midoriya caught sight of the other's finger twitch and hummed, looking at the picture. Hey, one looks like Todoroki. He comments offhandedly. Atsushi hums and thinks for a moment, recalling back to their conversation the previous night. Are you going to tell him when you meet him? Atsushi asks. 𝗂𝗄 hums in thought, thinking, someday, maybe when I end up confronting that old man, and if he dares do anything to my brother, well, I'll just have to put things into my own hands. He smirks, and it makes Atsushi shudder slightly. Please don't do anything illegal. Atsushi just smiles and looks elsewhere. Well, I suppose things can't be helped. For now, how about a spar? He smirks. Seriously? Uraraka asks, eyes sparkling. We're already here, aren't we? And I may not be any known pro hero, but I know my stuff to hopefully be called on accidentally. Atsushi grins and readies himself. If the staff seemed so conflicted amongst themselves to have us here, then why invite us in the first place? Tsuruko rages as Atsushi walks with them to their helicopter. A bunch of bullshit, to be honest. Takahara huffs. So they're aware. Atsushi frowns. Unfortunately. 𝗏𝗯 responds flatly. Atsushi looks down in thought before looking at them again. So what's the plan? He asks. We managed to come to an agreement that we would be there to help secure the area for their sports festival in 2 weeks' time. Oh, Nezu also said that you're allowed to come join with us, but for the most part, that's it. Deku explains. I see. Atsushi sighs heavily. Although, some of them were nice. Others were biased to themselves, but if we were given the chance to continue collaborating after the sports festival, hopefully they'll come around to us folks from Yokohama. Atsushi smiles and nods his head. We can only hope. He steps back as the blades of the helicopter begin running. See you in 2 weeks, he shouts. Sure thing, kid. Teruko waves. Also, if he's ever curious, 𝗏𝗯 began. But Atsushi smiles. I'll let you know he wants to talk to you. 𝗏𝗯 nods his head and waves farewell with his fellow hunting dogs. Atsushi watches them fly off into the sky, getting smaller and smaller until they've long since vanished into the night. Ready? Atsushi smiles in greeting as Midoriya runs over. Actually, the boy pointed over his shoulder. Someone wants to talk to you about something. Confused, Atsushi looks up to see Todoroki standing a bit off to the side, watching them. Atsushi blinks before smiling. Sure. Midoriya smiles and looks at Todoroki, nodding his head. Todoroki blinks before walking over. Want to go somewhere private to talk? He inquires. Todoroki glances around before nodding his head. Atsushi nods his head and looks at Midoriya. I'll stall the others. Atsushi salutes to that and they start heading to the sparring area. It was quiet between them both as they continued walking. 𝗏𝗯, I asked my sister about any other missing relatives of ours. We had 2. Atsushi looks at him and thinks for a moment. So you have some older siblings? Huh, I do. Todoroki nods his head. They entered the clearing but they looked on in surprise to see others there. Ah, there he is. Teruko grins brightly. Takahara being disgusted at whatever Deku is trying to convince him while 𝗏𝗯 simply blocked their argument out. What are you guys doing here? Atsushi exclaims while Todoroki stared at them. We decided to screw waiting. We might as well stay until the sports festival. Teruko shrugs his shoulders. More like Takahara's been using all the screens back at base to continue getting a head start at the ads bingo. It doesn't help that more have joined. 𝗏𝗯 sighs in exasperation. Atsushi facepalms before feeling a tug. He looks over at Todoroki before smiling. 𝗏𝗯, someone wants to speak to you. The other was quiet before humming, nodding his head. Atsushi rests a reassuring hand on Todoroki's head before leaving the two alone for some private talk. For once, he willed Byako to not heighten his senses. Think they'll be okay? Takahara asks. We can only hope. But if the kid's anything like 𝗏𝗯 regarding his father, I think it'll be all right. Atsushi smiles. Well, one thing's for sure. Teruko comments. The kid's gonna be in for a big surprise. All right, come on. You guys must be hungry, right? I lost my appetite. Takahara flails his hands, shaking his head. Teruko burst out into cackles while Atsushi just sighed, shaking his head. Ah, I'm so nervous, Midoriya exclaims, pacing just before the stadium where the sports festival was being held. You'll do great, kid. Atsushi pats his head. But, Midoriya whips to look at him but Atsushi covers his mouth. You and I have been training even before you got into UA, and I can tell that you've made improvements. But even then, I still can't throw you over my shoulder. Midoriya grumbled. There are other opportunities where you can throw me over your shoulder and onto the ground. But right now, you should focus on the festival. Midoriya grumbles and faces the stadium, his other classmates already gathered and chatting. Will you be there to watch? He asks, looking at him. I am, actually. Atsushi smiles. In the crowd. In the viewing room with us, actually. They turned their heads to see Takahara walking over, wearing his more casual outfit. He donned his hunting dog cap, but the rest was what he wears when in the Port Mafia. He planned on watching with your mother, but then your principal extended the invitation to Atsushi on our behalf. Oh, got it. Midoriya nods his head. Also, is your friend and Todoroki? Are things okay with them? He asks. Takahara and Atsushi look at each other before smiling. Atsushi pivots Midoriya's head. And the teen gasps at the sight of 𝗏𝗯 and Todoroki speaking to each other, surprised faces coming from the other students when 𝗏𝗯 nods and rests a reassuring hand on Todoroki's shoulder who nods back in response. Well, it's almost time for you to show off, kid. Kick butt, take pride, and no bone breaking. Act like this is a game of Uno. Atsushi happily smiled. Huh, Midoriya exclaims, staring at the other in utter bewilderment. Seriously, you gotta warn the poor guy when you're gonna suddenly switch. Takahara shudders. Me too. Also, you saw me act angry, though. Not as angry as when you're with Akutagawa, though. Have you seen how you acted around that man about 5 years ago? Similar to how Chuya-san always acted when around others compared to Dazai-san. but whatever. Atsushi shrugs his shoulders. Takahara sputters before turning their heads when 𝗏𝗨 returns. It's close to the opening ceremony for the kids. He instructs. Atsushi hums and ruffles Midoriya's head. Just do your best, kid. He smiles. Midoriya nods and hurries off to his classmates. All right, we did a premise check. Everything's good to go. 𝗏𝗏 walks over with Deku. You too. Secured, Captain. The two say in unison. Good. Now come on. Let's head up to our designated viewing room. Atsushi blinks. We get our own viewing room? He asked, baffled. Yeah, either because we're guests or some of those pro heroes didn't want to be in the same room as quirkless but have quirk people. Take it as you will. We have our own room. With a screen. Takahara whoops. Atsushi blinks in confusion and looks at Deku as they start walking. Wait, so they don't know about that? He asks, confused. Surprisingly but thankfully. Deku responds in barely a whisper. Thankfully Atsushi could hear with his heightened hearing. And Deku took advantage of that. The existence of ability users are only kept within Yokohama. But to the HPSC, there's a 0% quirk population within our borders, and yet we're from Yokohama. With powers. Atsushi frowns heavily. He pulls out his phone and texts to Deku. Do you think the HPSC will look into it? We can only hope they don't. But even then, the government and framework would do our damnedest to not let our existence be known. And if anything, that would mean isolation. Atsushi's eyes widen slightly at that before looking down, frowning heavily. Deku watches him and sighs heavily. I know, it's a hard risk to take. He rests a hand on the younger's head. But it's for the best, for the safety of yourself and the people of Yokohama. Atsushi stared at the ground and solemnly nodded his head. You too, hurry up or you'll miss out on the opening ceremony. 𝗏𝗏 shouts over her shoulder. See coming. Atsushi calls and the pair hurry inside just in time to hear the crowd cheer upon the opening speech from one of Midoriya's classmates. But at the first objection being an obstacle course, Atsushi is already scolding Midoriya. What did I say about do as I say not as I do, Midoriya Izuku? Atsushi scolds and bonks the teen's head. Hello, hey, at least I'm in the top 10. Screw that if you decide to put your life at risk. Another bonk. Yup, that's how you know you got yourself a certified Nakajima Atsushi mentee. 𝗏𝗏 shouts. Huh. Midoriya panics. Atsushi has a tendency to be self-sacrificial, explains 𝗏𝗨. Look, even though when I joined the agency and my entrance exam had a fake bomb, doesn't mean Midoriya has to use minds that are real. Atsushi proclaims. Yup, this is going to be a long sports festival. Atsushi watched the interlude events going on, smiling quietly as the students all seem to be having fun. But for some reason, can't relax. He looks over to see Nezu. Atsushi blinks before weakly smiling. Yeah, I'm proud of the kids, but just, something's off. What do you mean? Atsushi waves a reassuring hand. It's not in the sense that there will be a villain attack, far from it, just, it's been oddly silent. He pulls out his phone. I haven't received a call or anything from the police. Even though we're keeping the main group of villains distracted with this, there could still be others out there causing trouble. Nezu hums and looks off to watch the students of the other classes. Well, you must be informed of the recent doings of Stain. Heard of the name circulating, but couldn't find any research. He is dubbed as Hero Killer, Stain. Atsushi looks at the principal in shock for a moment before hearing someone call his name. Turning his head, he sees Midoriya and his friends running over. "Aw, guys," Atsushi exclaims as Nezu simply smiles and goes along his way. You kids did great. Atsushi grins, ruffling Midoriya's hair who smiled. Some of us did better than we expected, too. Sure, we sort of ended up last place in the cavalry battle, but we still got into the fighting tournament. Uraraka exclaims. Great. Atsushi smiles. This calls for a celebration. We still have time to get some food, as well. Ida said, doing us usual motions with his hands. Atsushi laughs before flinching when his phone rang. Well, speak of the devil. He chuckles. Work calls. Todoroki inquires. Yeah, it's been oddly quiet, to be honest. Atsushi responds and answers the phone. Nakajima Atsushi speaking. Yes, I'm actually here at the festival watching. Atsushi blinks as the voice on the other line continued, walking off to the side and joining next to 𝗏𝗏, who was suddenly taller than him, and she leaned over to listen. I see. His eyebrows furrowed and his expression contorted to one of seriousness. Yes, I've heard of him. Another victim. That makes 24, frowns 𝗏𝗏. You should go look at the scene, kid. Atsushi nods his head and turns his attention back to the phone call at hand. Okay, I'll get there as soon as I can. Who's this hero's name? Silence. Atsushi's eyes shot wide while 𝗏𝗏's eyebrows furrowed. Ida, hang on, isn't that one of your mentee's friends? The 𝗏𝗏 look alike. She asks. Atsushi just looks at her and numbly nods. 𝗏𝗏 stares before nodding back. You get over there now. Deal with that stuff. Unfortunately, the tournaments are starting now. But maybe you still have time. Go. Atsushi nods and he takes off, running right past the others as they were just about to head back inside. And Nakajima-san, Midoriya shouts, "Let him go, it's an emergency," Teruko said, making them look at her. "Right now, you need to focus on the tournament. Now hurry along, you kids." Hero killer, Stain. Real name, Akaguro Chisome. Age, 31. No family, all deceased. Hit count, 23. Turned 24 of just a few hours ago. Atsushi frowned at the report he was given, looking at the villain's reports, the profile picture and numerous photos following, as well as the list of heroes he has attacked. Yes, the officer nods. And his recent victim is Turbo Hero, Ingenium, real name Ida Tensei, age 30. 2 parents and a younger brother. Ida Tenya. Atsushi sighed heavily. "Where was the recent attack, sir?" he asks. "Hasu City." The office answers. "Nakajima, you aren't planning on confronting this villain, right?" Atsushi frowned slightly. "If I don't, more people, specifically heroes, would be in the same situation as Ida Tensei." Atsushi pulled at the edges of his fingerless gloves. "I may be a detective, but where I'm from, I'm on the front lines." He looks back. "Have you already contacted his folks?" "Yes, we've received word that his mother just arrived, and his younger brother would be here shortly." Atsushi frowned heavily and turned his head to the television at the corner, showing the end results of the tournament. Ida tied with Tokoyami in 3rd place. He suddenly hears rushing footsteps, and turns around in time to see Ida run up to his mother in a panic before rushing to the room his brother was in. Atsushi had to square his shoulders and brace himself at the boy's scream. Shakily, he brings up the report, his eyes zeroing in on a subject. Quirk, blood-curdle, temporarily paralyzes their opponent by ingesting their blood samples. Atsushi silently hands the report to the officer. "I am going to do whatever it takes to find this man. Please, look after them and make sure they get home safe." He whispers, "Yes, sir." The officer nods. Atsushi nods back and watches the officer walk off. Turning his head, he frowned at the sight of Ida and quietly walked over. His mother, who was trying to console her son, looked up to see him, only for Atsushi to kneel down next to him. "Ida-kun." Atsushi rests a hand on the teenager's shoulder, making them look at him with tears streaming down his face. Pulling him, Ida gasped when Atsushi hugged him tightly. It was sudden, purely out of instinct. But before Atsushi could figure out if he was doing the right thing, Ida choked over his breath and he clung to him, continuing to sob. Atsushi takes a deep breath, closing his eyes, and he holds the boy tighter. What's going to happen to him? The mother stammers, worried for her eldest son. Atsushi frowned heavily and looked back to the door. "I asked my friend, who's my agency's doctor, about any possibilities. She said that on one hand, he could have passed away. The lightest case, he's rendered paraplegic." Atsushi could feel Ida hold him tighter, and Atsushi just held a hand to comfort the mother, who fell into her own sobs. "After the sports festival, you all will be receiving your internships," Atsushi said, walking with Ida back to the school. "Are you sure you should go?" "Yes, I have to." Ida nods his head. Atsushi frowns quietly and rests a hand on the other's head. "If this is about you seeking revenge against Stain, please, be safe." Ida looks at him in shock. You're not going to stop me. If I try to stop you, then I'll be a hypocrite." Atsushi shrugs his shoulders. Ida just stared, shocked. Atsushi offers a quiet smile before turning his head to the skies. 5 years ago, something happened to my friends, my family. We were all framed, and I felt too helpless to help them. We were all split up, them stuck, and myself out there. I wanted to do anything in my power to help them, but I couldn't. Not yet. What happened? Atsushi was quiet for a moment. "You don't want to know, believe me." He offers a weak smile. "Because where I come from, it's not really friendly to most outsiders." Ida blinks before looking at him, conflicted. "Won't you get in trouble?" "It just depends if you'll manage to reel in your anger, Ida-kun." Atsushi responds, facing ahead. Blinking, Ida turns his attention back. They were standing before the gates of the school. "You still have time, you know. Stay with your mother for as much as you can. I'll inform the staff that you will be on absence for an indefinite time. But in 2 days, internships will be announced, with it being due at the end of the week." Atsushi looks at him. "Go." Ida stares before nodding and takes off. He smiles as the boy vanishes off in seconds. And he looks back to see Teruko standing there with Takahara. The captain sighs and waves a hand. "We'll inform his teacher and the principal about the situation." Atsushi bows his head to her, and blinks when she rests a hand on it. "You've really grown, huh, tiger?" she muses, a smug look on her face. Atsushi just chuckles, smiling. "Just trying my best. Have you ever invested in glasses, by chance?" What? Like Ranpo-san, kid? Takahara elaborates. "Yeah, how about it?" Teruko grinned. Atsushi blinked owlishly and thought for a moment. "As sort of. Kuyu-san showed me some glasses for aesthetics since I already have good eyesight. But they were expensive, so I declined the offer of those glasses." He nervously smiled. Moving on from the topic of glasses, Juno walks over. We were informed that the students that managed to get internships from pro heroes were kept in mind, but those that didn't can choose from about 40 agencies for internships. Meaning, Atsushi blinked, meaning that, if we managed to get the paperwork done, we could manage to get you in. Teruko grins. Atsushi blinks before frowning. I have a bad feeling something's going to happen. He comments, I would help you with the paperwork, but I think that leads to a lot of stuff going through the HPSC. I don't think we could manage through 2 days, if not 1. Atsushi said. And, Giano folds his arms. I can tell that you're not telling us something. You and your heightened sense. Atsushi sighs and looks down. I've been asked to investigate the situation regarding hero killer 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Ever since Ada's older brother got into an accident and subsequently became the 24th victim, they've needed more manpower. I'm a licensed underground hero that's somehow going up the rankings, but I'm merely a foreigner detective, so they're using you as bait. Then, Deku frowned. Hey, don't say it like that. Atsushi waves his hands. I've already accepted, meaning that I'm going to go all over Hasu City. Then have a little buddy with you. It's fine. Atsushi waves his hands. Maybe you should have accepted Kuyu-san's offer for those glasses. You need them. Giano deadpans. Atsushi just nervously smiles at that. Another meeting with the principal. To be honest, it was always nerve-wracking whenever he's called up to their office. Atsushi's intimidated by them. They're like 𝗧𝗲𝗏 and Ranpo combined. Nakajima-san. Atsushi stopped his tumbling thoughts and turned his head to a classroom door. Was that my imagination? He looks at the sign at the door. 1A. Isn't that Midoriya-kun's class? That detective trainer of yours, Midoriya? Asui tilts her head curiously. Why yeah. Midoriya looks at the form presented before him. The thing is that he's a detective, and really busy. I didn't know he had an agency. Well, where's his work taking him? Anjiro asks. Hasu City. Midoriya answers. Uraraka blinked and frowned heavily, turning to look at Ada, who was across the room, silent. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and everyone turned their head once it opened. I heard my name. They stared at him for a moment before Uraraka and Midoriya yelled out, Nakajima-san. What are you doing here? Todoroki asks, confused. Was called to speak with your principal. Terrifying. Atsushi shuddered before looking at their numerous papers. Oh, you kids got your internship forms, he remarks. Yeah, it's due at the end of the week, though. Midoriya explained. 2 days' time, then. Atsushi hums. Nakajima-san. They all turn their heads to Ada as he walks up to the detective. If I could. Ada holds up a form, and Atsushi blinks in surprise to see his name on it. I would like you to intern with me. To say the least, his class was shocked. Atsushi blinks in surprise before taking a look at the paper. He had no agency building, his work more freelance. But from the looks of it, the hunting dogs still managed to get him through and placed him where his current investigation takes place. Hasu City, his presence needed in regards to tracking down and, possibly, taking down hero killer 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Atsushi frowns and looks at him. Is this what you want, Ada-kun? Once you fill out the form, you can't change it and must commit to it for the entire week of your internship. Ada looks at him, nodding. Yes. Atsushi frowns before sighing quietly. All right, but next time. Atsushi placed a hand on his head, smiling warmly. Come to me privately. Ada looks at him before nodding his head. But Atsushi could tell it was different. He was more serious, steadfast. Guess I have to keep the hunting dogs on speed dial for this. Atsushi shakes his head fondly and ushered them all back inside. Think long and hard about your choices, everyone. He tells them. Why yes sir. Please don't call me that. It makes me sound old. Atsushi sighs fondly before nodding his head and heads off, waving to them. For some reason, when you talked about your first trainer, I was thinking more seriously and scary. Kirishima comments. He's nice. Kaminari grins. Then you wouldn't like it when he's angry. Nervously smiled Midoriya. Which is rare, adds Uraraka. Please be careful, Jinko. I will, don't worry. Atsushi assured the others on the phone, waiting just at the substation to Hasu City. What will you even be doing during your time there? Ryunosuke asks. Patrols. And hopefully, teach my intern some things. Well, if he needs a mentor at this given time, you'd be the best option. Atsushi smiles before hearing footsteps. Turning his head, he sees Ida standing there with his bags and a suitcase. Atsushi offers a smile, and Ida blinks before smiling slightly back. All right, I have to go, he says into the phone. Stay safe, and if something happens to either of you, expect me at the door. Atsushi just nervously smiled. I get it. Talk to you later, Ryu. Atsushi hangs up and pockets his phone before looking at Ida. Ready, Ida-kun? Yes. Atsushi has never been to Hasu City before. Quite a big and crowded city with many alleyways. He hums to himself as he surveys the city just as they got off the train. Ida-kun, you know that I'm as much as a foreigner to Musutafu. Do you think you can explain some things about Hasu City to me? He asks. Anyway, he could distract the boy from thinking about revenge. But he knew that he was failing miserably. But seeing the detective's efforts, Ada relaxes slightly. We're in a city district west of Tokyo. The only known landmark here is Hasu General Hospital. Atsushi scans the area and hums, nodding his head. Fair. I could tell the hospital from even here. Everything looks the same, and with how squished the buildings are, leads to many shadowed places and tight alleyways. Atsushi hummed to himself. If Ryunosuke or Chuya had come with me, they'd flourish in a city like this. Nakajima-san. He turns his head to look at his intern. You didn't have to be stationed here to look after me. Atsushi blinks before humming to himself. Walk and talk with me, Ida-kun, until we get to the place Teruko placed for me during our time here. They grabbed their things and started walking. During the span of the end of the sports festival and you being informed of your internships, I was called to have my presence here in Hasu City. Why? Simply put, they asked me to track down Stain since I was steadfast in doing it when I saw you and your mother. Ida's eyes widen and he looks at him. Even though I volunteered before they asked me formally for my assistance, Ryunosuke was skeptical, even the hunting dogs. Atsushi continued. Ida blinked, puzzled. Why? Atsushi was quiet. Because I'm a foreigner. Atsushi looks at him. They care about their heroes, and have already lost many to Stain. Ryunosuke's guess, they've put me out as the sacrificial lamb. I wouldn't be surprised that if I get killed, crippled, or possibly manage to apprehend him, they wouldn't make it a big deal. Is that why you were hesitant in taking me in? Partly. Atsushi looks at him. But I knew that I couldn't leave you alone. You might end up doing something reckless, rightfully so. You're full of grief and rage. You want to avenge your brother you dearly care for. I know someone like that, who'd do anything to save their sister. Ida stares before they both stop in front of a building. A hotel. Teruko has already paid for our week stay in one of the rooms. Once we set up shop, you can change into your hero costume. We'll reconvene here. Wait for me, okay. Atsushi smiles. Ida blinks before nodding his head. Yes, sir. Please don't call me sir. I don't want to feel old, and my apologies, Nakajima-san. Atsushi has kept up with it, and Ida has managed to reel himself back enough to be in stride with the man. They've patrolled, searched, and talked to numerous officers regarding any sightings of Stain. And throughout the week, Atsushi taught a few things for Ida, hoping the boy could keep note after their internship together. Do you work best at night, Nakajima-san? Ida asked as they entered another alleyway. I suppose I do. My quirk is best fitted for night, he explains. Ah, I see. Ida nods his head. Atsushi smiles back before he suddenly hears something, even without his ears out. What the? Atsushi turned his head and his eyes widened. Fire. Before they could even move, a sudden impact, and now Atsushi was pinned to the ground, his pupils dilating at the sight of a familiar but covered face. Another hero to purge. The person above him questioned, slow and ragged. Atsushi's eyes widened. Nakajima-san. Hero killer. It was a standstill. Stain pinning Atsushi down with a chipped blade pointed right at it. And even without Atsushi's heightened senses, the smell of blood permeated into Stain's very being. Blood. Atsushi stares at Stain in the eye. You underground, but I guess. Atsushi grits. Underground. Aren't they the same things? Stain continued. Does caring about my job as a detective from a different city count more than being a hero? Gritting his teeth, he reeled his legs back and kicked Stain off him. Atsushi throws himself back onto his feet, an arm held out in front of Ida. Don't make rash decisions, Ida. His gaze relays on the teen. A detective, so a foreigner, unfortunately, and they've tasked me in tracking you down, as well, Atsushi said. The other was silent before letting out a loud laugh. And what's a detective supposed to do against me? Smirked the hero killer. Ida grits his teeth. But before he could do anything, his eyes widened at a sudden flash of blue. And the next thing he knew, Atsushi was suddenly in front of Stain. His entire person changed from a second prior. Atsushi threw a kick, tossing Stain into the air while using his changed hand to grab the blade of the chipped sword, ignoring the pricks of its uneven blade. Nakajima-san. Ida utters, eyes wide in shock. Atsushi glares at Stain, who managed to catch himself on the side of the wall, and his eyes furrowed. Quite the mistake, hero detective. Stain grins, suddenly holding a dagger, its blade of blood. Atsushi stared before his eyes widened and looked down at his torso, a patch of blood. They all must be purged. Atsushi looked back and gasped when he was thrown and pinned once more, the clatter of the sword not too far, but it being picked up follows closely behind. And suddenly, he couldn't move. Nakajima-san. Atsushi's tiger eyes widened at the chipped sword raised over him, Stain pinning him hard. You heroes, you are all the same. Get away from him. I'm not letting you kill him. Ida yells, rushing. No. Atsushi's eyes widened. Don't engage, you'll get hurt. But he couldn't do anything. Atsushi watched helplessly as Ida, in his rage, rushed the enemy and got himself injured by one of his daggers. And, two, landed on the ground, paralyzed. Stain's quirk. Atsushi grits his teeth, struggling to free himself. I can't move. How much longer? He glances over at 𝐻𝗧𝗧, seeing him just barely shift. Does the blood type affect how long stain is able to paralyze someone? Atsushi couldn't figure it out before a searing pain forced itself through, and he yelled in pain. Nakajima-san. 𝐻𝗧𝗧 yells. Atsushi grits his teeth, struggling to keep his mouth shut. Another stab on his leg. Stop with my leg, seriously. It's already been cut off and stabbed before. Atsushi found himself growling past the paralyzation, tiger eyes flaring up, but only for a second before he falls completely numb. And almost at the same instance, the sight of stain was replaced in a blink, too. Midoriya-kun. 𝐻𝗧𝗧 stares in shock. 𝐻𝗧𝗧-kun. Nakajima-san. Midoriya looks at them. Atsushi just looked on in confusion, dazed. Was he losing blood? But, Nakajima-san, you're bleeding. No, that shouldn't happen. Unless, Stain's quirk is also paralyzing Byaku's negating ability. He was losing blood. A lot of blood. And from the looks of it, he wouldn't be moving for a while. Atsushi's expression became one of helplessness, his gaze stuck on the kids pleadingly. Please, don't fight. But from the looks on their faces, they were terrified. Before Atsushi could keep track of what's going on, Midoriya resumed the fight. Atsushi couldn't even look over, trying to keep himself awake as 𝐻𝗧𝗧 kept on talking to him, trying his best even from where he laid on the ground as well. Then suddenly, a stream of fire. That woke Atsushi up. Todoroki. Then a conflicted expression. What are they doing here without the heroes they chose to intern under? Am I the only one? Don't worry, the pro heroes have been contacted and will be here in a moment. There's currently a situation regarding 𝗫𝗲 raging through Hasu. Atsushi grits his teeth in the sense of cold spiking against his back as he is suddenly lifted. But hopefully, with the help of the hunting dogs, they will be here any second. Atsushi's eyes drew wide. Was that why my phone went off just minutes ago? A cold realization. Oh no, that means. His thoughts were cut off by the sound of fighting. Todoroki, get that dagger away from him, or else Nakajima-san will continue to stay paralyzed. Midoriya shouts. What? On it. Atsushi could just hear the fight happening. His gaze stuck to the night sky overhead. Ice, fire, glints of blades. 𝗧𝗧𝗧. You to be heroes. A nuisance. But my duty stands to purge all heroes. Pain. Atsushi couldn't even move to yell at the pain in his torso. One will have to do it tonight. Nakajima-san. A stream of ice, and before Atsushi knew it, Midoriya had grabbed him and jumped out of the way from another stream of ice. Kids, Atsushi managed barely. His voice rasped. Can't. You've already helped us a lot. Nakajima-san. Atsushi gasped slightly, eyes widening at the other's kind smile. Midoriya stands up and faces Stain with Todoroki. Now please, let us help you. Those kids, they worked amazingly. Even though they've fought against one another, they've still managed to find out how to work together. Although, to be honest, he and Akutagawa would be at each other's necks back then. Atsushi watched in a daze as they worked, and he felt his finger twitch just as 𝗃𝗧𝗧 suddenly stood up, blocking an attack from Stain from getting to Todoroki. 𝗃𝗧𝗏-kun. Midoriya shouts in relief, smiling. You all shouldn't have to fight for me. 𝗃𝗧𝗏 whispered. He turned to look at Atsushi, but the detective just smiled at him warmly. I'm sorry I've been reckless, Nakajima-san. And now, 𝗃𝗧𝗏 gasped, eyes widening at the sight of light blue glow. Atsushi blinks before his eyes open fuller and he intakes a large breath. The edges of his wounds were glowing, slowly but surely sealing, Byaku negating his wounds. Atsushi just grins and looks at them. Do anything in your power, 𝗃𝗧𝗏-kun. I'll be fine. He looked at him, and 𝗃𝗧𝗏's eyes widened. Go. The team blinked before nodding his head and they resumed the fight. Atsushi feels his hand shake. Just a bit more. Atsushi looks at the kids and smirks. Show Stain what a real hero is worth. They were falling, with broken engines and an arm. Whoa. Midoriya panics, the ground coming in close. But before he or 𝗃𝗧𝗏 could brace themselves, someone suddenly catches them just as Todoroki opens an ice slice. The person covered them from the impact of the jugged ice wall behind them, leading them to collapse to the ground. And Nakajima-san. 𝗃𝗧𝗏 and Midoriya explain, the detective groaning at the pain. That's gonna bite me later, won't it? Atsushi grumbles, rubbing his back. Instantly they both look up to Stain, only to see him unconscious, stuck amongst the ice. Did we get him? Midoriya asked. He's knocked out, frowned Atsushi. There could be some rope around here, Todoroki said. On it. Come on. Nope. Atsushi manages to grab Midoriya, stopping him from moving. You and 𝗃𝗧𝗏 stay put. You both are heavily injured, with your broken arm and hurt legs. You as well, 𝗃𝗧𝗏-kun. But what about you? Midoriya asked, worried. Don't worry about me. Atsushi smiled, standing up. A little lightheaded, yes, but thankfully I've negated my injuries. True to his word, the open slashes of his tattered clothes showed no signs of wounds. Found some rope. They turned back as Todoroki returned with some rope. One end left in a trash collector. After letting the ice melt and restraining Stain as much as they could, the walkout was quiet with 𝗃𝗧𝗏 taking it slow, Todoroki dragging along Stain, and Atsushi carrying Midoriya. You kids did good, Atsushi found himself saying. If only I could have done more, though. You've helped a lot regardless. From getting concussions, at least. Midoriya nervously smiled. Atsushi just smiled quietly and looked over to Ida. The other looked conflicted. Ida-kun. The teen looks up to meet his gaze and warm smile. After you all are treated, I implore you to return back home and be with your mother. You need some reevaluation after what has happened. Ida blinks in surprise. They exited the alleyway and into a quiet street. Where do we go now? Atsushi frowned heavily. You all are hurt, but we have Stain here with us. Well, why are you here? A foreign voice calls. And Atsushi feels Midoriya freeze. Gran Torino. The boy exclaims. The hero of your internship. Atsushi wonders, only to be interrupted when the boy, subsequently, had a yellow boot to the face. Not the weirdest entrance, though. Atsushi watched with a quiet smile at the sight before him before his ears flick and his eyes widen. Get down, he yells. Everyone looked at him in confusion, but it was too late. A single gust of wind was what they managed to hear before the next second. A flying Namu snatched Midoriya off the ground. Midoriya-kun. His classmates and Atsushi yell. Before they could even do anything, there was a sudden dash, and they stare in shock as Stain rushes across, suddenly free from the ropes. Atsushi's eyes widen and he rushes over just as he sees the Namu waver and get taken down, letting go of Midoriya. He just barely managed to catch the boy before they landed on the ground, right next to the Namu and Stain. Fake heroes and criminals that wave their power idly should be purged. Stain's words echoed upon meeting the ground. Both Atsushi and Midoriya stare at the villain, the Namu beneath him motionless. It was almost a moment, but even when the wrap that masked his eyes fell, the two fell frozen under that piercing gaze, all until Stain's words fell into a halt, suddenly unconscious standing up. What? Atsushi uttered, holding Midoriya closely who all but held him back, eyes shaking. What just happened? Midoriya whispered, voice trembling. You kids really are something, going up against hero killer, Stain. That includes you, Atsushi. Teruko comments. The detective all but ducked his head, sitting at Midoriya's bedside. I should have been more responsible, on my part. Atsushi looks down. You did all you could. You aren't indestructible, either, you and your tiger negating your wounds and injuries. Takahara sighs heavily. Seriously, though. A karate chop to the head. Don't scare us like that. Oh, what the? Courtesy of 𝗂𝐴𝐽𝐻. Yup, feels like it. Atsushi grumbled, shaking his head. So we're just going to give this win to Endeavor. Todoroki frowned heavily. Unfortunately, Jouno sighed heavily. If we wanted to, we would have given the credit to Atsushi. Wait, what? The other blinked. But of course, he's not a well-known hero. And from what the police and the HPSC are concerned, he's not an actual hero. But Nakajima-sen risked his life for this. Wasn't it the police that asked him to do this investigation regarding Stain? Ida furrowed his eyebrows. That's because he volunteered first before he was assigned this. Moreover, they see him as dispensable. Jouno impassively answered. The three students all but freeze at the word. While on the other hand Atsushi just flinched slightly at the word but relaxed, gaze stuck on the covers of his bed. If I had a nickel for every time I've been called that. He sighed. No trauma dumping in front of the children, you should know better. Takahara sighed, patting the other's head. But we're not the only ones that are mad when we realize the reason behind Atsushi being called to do this. The students all look at each other and back. What's going to happen, then? Todoroki asked. The hunting dogs looked at each other while Jouno frowned. Fukuzawa-san informed us to tell Atsushi that he needs to return back to Yokohama. What? Everyone, including Atsushi, exclaimed. I am fine, really. I can still. Atsushi. The other stops immediately. Ever since this sudden request of you looking for Stain. Your agency has all but been iffy about the situation. Not only them, but all of us in the tripartite framework. Jouno states. Tripartite framework. Midoriya murmurs, confused. If the HPSC sees foreigners as dispensable in their territory, then we'd rather you be safe and not be a self-sacrificing tiger in a city that wouldn't appreciate your work publicly. Teruko continued. No less that you are alone here. Deku adds. Atsushi blinked and looked down. How did the others react? When all this happened, they look at him and sheepishly glance away. Akutagawa was this close to breaking that promise you made years ago, and he and his organization were entertaining the idea of raiding the HPSC headquarters. They also had to hold him back from latching onto the helicopter and storming in to smack you upside the head for your idiots. Kenji was about to go berserk if not for Dazai to nullify it. Chuya, too. Your entire agency was about to go to war. Everyone was about to go to war. Us too. But Nuo, we have to be professional and not bite their heads off. Atsushi just looked unfazed while the rest just looked on, puzzledly terrified. Wait, so? Does that mean that Nakajima-san would be returning back home? Midoriya frowned. Unless the tripartite framework, as a whole this time, can come to an agreement with the HPSC in treating Atsushi as an equal. Jouno said. That's understandable. Midoriya looks down. It would likely be a long battle, one that we're not sure we would want to pursue. It's that much of a hassle, all because we want to ensure Atsushi's safety. The students all looked at each other. But he cares about you kids. They looked back at J.O.N.O. So for the sake of you and him, we'll try all we can to negotiate. But don't bring your hopes up. Right. They nod back as Teruko looks over at Atsushi. At the end of their internship, Akutagawa's going to be picking you up at the train station. She hands a train ticket to him. Atsushi hums, nodding his head. The hunting dogs soon leave him be. And Atsushi sighs to himself. Will we be able to see each other again? Midoriya asked outright. Atsushi blinks before smiling. Soon, but with what's going on, it might be a while. He admits, turning to the rest. But if you find yourself in any trouble and, subsequently, you're in Yokohama, give me a call. Atsushi stands up and bows. I am in your favor, truly, and I know that the others will agree with me. The kids all stare in shock before Midoriya beams. Thank you, Nakajima-san. I see. That does seem quite the problem in your hands. Nezu hums. Yes, Atsushi nods his head. When are you due to return home? The principal inquires. Atsushi blinks and checks the train ticket. An hour after school. He concludes. Well, I hope that things between your tripartite framework and the HPSC have smoothed out and you can return back to Musutafu as a recognized detective and hero. Atsushi blinks and smiles. Take care of the kids, Nezu. I'll be working on it. Atsushi chuckles and bows his head, standing up. The week of internships has finished, and the students of WANA have returned and were just as excitable in knowing what they've done during their internships. As Atsushi walked over to the class, he paused to hear their voices. Oh yeah, I've been meaning to ask, Ida-kun. That Detective Nakajima, is he okay? Yeah, I heard that ever since whatever happened in Hosu, he was fired. More students poured in their side of rumors. Is me leaving that much of a big deal? Rumors, these days. Atsushi sighs. Still, though, the rumor of there being a traitor amidst Class 1 is still there. He grumbled, thinking about it. They'll manage, right? Ah, Nakajima-san. Atsushi blinks and turns his head to see Midoriya peeking out the door. Midoriya-kun, he greets as the boy walks over to him. Came back from another meeting with the principal? The boy asks curiously as Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki peek out. Yeah, I came to inform him that I'll unfortunately have to halt my investigations over some things. Atsushi waves a reassuring hand. Do we have time to see you off? Ida asks. An hour, he responds. So you really were fired and have to leave? Uraraka frowns. No, it's not like that. Atsushi waves his hands and rests one on her head. It's more on the lines of my folks worried out of their minds ever since Stain and are withdrawing me from my station here in Musutafu. Atsushi looks down. My folks back home concluded that the commission saw me as dispensable, being a foreigner and all, and they've already lost some heroes to Stain. So they made you be bait. She dreads. It's fine, really. Atsushi smiles reassuringly as he waves a hand. So until we smooth things out, I'm asked to return back home for my safety. Sheepishly sighed, glancing away. And taking into account of USJ incident and Hosu incident, they decided to implement that dumb rule they made for me years ago. What's the rule? Todoroki asked. 1 week off after every disaster or kidnapping rule. Atsushi lets his head fall forward. You deserve it for all that you've helped us with, Nakajima-san. Midoriya smiles. Atsushi blinks before smiling quietly. You kids, too. You need a break. Unfortunately, we can't. Ida shakes his head. Huh? Atsushi blinks. With summer break coming up, so are finals. Atsushi blinks owlishly and tilts his head, confused. Midoriya stares back. A really big and important test over all the subjects we've learned over the semester. He elaborates. So like the entrance exam. Yes, but everything we've learned is crammed in. Yikes. Atsushi grimaced lightly. Well, you kids still have school to get through. He looks at them with a smile. Our usual spot. Yeah, they say enthusiastically. Thank you again for treating me, and Ko-san. Atsushi smiles, bowing his head as he holds his phone. No worries. When you come and visit, you are always welcome for dinner, 𝗵𝗃 happily said, but Atsushi could tell she was trying to stop herself from crying. I will. Maybe next time I can bring some of my folks. Yes, of course. They're always welcome. After a bit of more chatter, Atsushi said his goodbye and pulled his phone back to check at the time. The kids would be here any second. A sudden breeze. And Atsushi looks up at the skies overhead. He feels a sense of nostalgia hit him for a moment. The sunset skies overhead. Nakajima-san. Atsushi turns his head and smiles to see Midoriya, Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki walking over. He blinks in surprise when they present him with a big plushie. Surprise. Midoriya and Uraraka beams. Almost instantly, Atsushi feels a whole lot younger. Whoa, it's so huge. Where did you find it? He asks, grinning brightly as he hugged the plushie. We saw it on our way here, and we thought that it would be a good enough parting gift. Look, Midoriya moves the plushie to reveal its cute face. It's a white tiger, just like your quirk. Atsushi just continued hugging it, not knowing his ears and tail were out, flicking and waving with excitement. But what this is such good quality. How'd you buy it? He asked, confused. Endeavor's credit card. Todoroki answers, holding up the black card. It's so much money. Uraraka whispers. Atsushi just laughs. Yeah, I can understand how that feels. I wouldn't even be surprised if my husband has about the same amount. Or even more. Todoroki's eyes widened while Uraraka looked like she was about to faint and Ida looked on in shock with Midori. I'm married. Ida stammers. Atsushi blinks and raises an eyebrow, confused. I thought you knew. I mentioned my husband during past conversations. He points at a silver earring on his left ear on time of his phone alarm ringing. And his smile turns melancholy. Well, that's my cue to head to the station. We'll see you off, Midori exclaims, standing up. Atsushi smiled warmly and went to get his things only for the others to have already done so. He stares before letting out a chuckle and they head off to the station. Train ticket in hand, they helped put his things on the train and stand on the station platform. It was just mere minutes before the doors would close and he would return home, but Atsushi turns back around to the students. I think it's about time I properly introduce myself. He bows his head. I'm Nakajima Atsushi, detective of Yokohama's Armed Detective Agency, one of the 3 organizations of the government's tripartite framework. He stands upright, and our sole goal as the framework is to protect the people of our city. They stared at him in shock and he cheekily smiled. Please, come visit whenever you want. And if you find yourself in any trouble in the city, call me. Next station is Yokohama. The voice on the intercom rang. See, call us. The students call, and Atsushi smiles as the doors shut. He nods his head and waves to them, seeing the kids wave back and follow the train as much as they can until it's long since left the station. Do you think they'll come to an agreement? Todoroki asks. Midoriya stood silently on the platform, watching the train grow smaller and small. I'm not sure. They're so unfair. Teruko groaned in irritation the moment she, Fukuzawa, and Mori returned back to the room the others were hanging out in. Another failed meeting. Tanizaki frowns. They're stubborn, sighs Mori. His own irritation hinted. They're adamant that Atsushi brought on more danger, given his history. Did they at least admit to the fact that they used him as a scapegoat? Ryunosuke questions. They formatted in the sense of for the protection of their heroes sort of way. Which is bullshit since he's also a licensed hero. Teruko proclaimed. Instantly the ravenet bristled with Kyoyuka. The two looked ready to murder if not for a promise and changed affiliation. Atsushi just sighed, rubbing his face. They just see people lesser than those with quirks. And the thing is that no one knows the existence of ability users, who in history are actually much more powerful than quirks. Fukuzawa explains. So unless we want the commission to see him as an equal or a higher person in power, Chuya hums. That means revealing the existence of abilities. Atsushi finishes, looking down. They've all worked long and hard to keep the news of abilities kept within Yokohama borders. It was all they could do in wanting to keep the city peaceful. Would I still be able to go? Atsushi asks, looking at Fukuzawa. The older frowned but sighed. If you're willing to endure their system, you're free to do whatever. But you're still on that 2-week break, Atsushi. I know. I couldn't even go back if I tried. You guys would just drag me back. He waves a hand. Correction, I would drag you back. Ryunosuke narrowed his eyes and Atsushi just chuckled. Nakajima-san. Atsushi smiles at the sight of Midoriya, Ida, Uraraka, and Todoroki all looking at the hologram video call. Hey, you guys. Atsushi smiles, waving. He surveyed the call and hums. You 4 are still in class? He inquired. Yeah, but we're all just studying for finals. Midoriya explained. How are finals? He tilts his head. We're surviving. Uraraka nervously smiled. It's similar to our entrance exam. A written portion and then a practical. Ida explains. With those robots. Atsushi tilts his head. That's what one student from another class told us. Todoroki nods his head. Atsushi hums in thought. Wouldn't that be too easy for you all, though? He wondered. I mean, you've all improved your skills and quirks. If you were to go against those robots similar to the practical entrance exams, you'd manage yourselves in seconds. Why, you must be exaggerating, right? Midoriya asks. Midoriya-kun. You have to admit that you've grown, you and your classmates. Atsushi smiles warmly. Since USJ, your internships and Hasu. He sighs wistfully. I just wish I could be there to help train you guys for your practical final. Atsushi instantly snaps out of it, blinking several times. Oh Arahabaki, I've been hanging out with Dazai-san too much. I sounded just like him. There was a crashing sound outside the room, causing Atsushi and the rest to look over. It was a string of curses and profanities, all muffled beyond the walls. But amongst it all, they could just barely hear, "You've corrupted him, shitty mackerel." Atsushi just nervously smiles while the 4 students look on curiously. Tea. Atsushi blinks. Tea. Yaoyorozu smiles brightly, holding the wrapped package. It's expensive tea, whispers Ashido with a grin. They're actually a gift for some reunited family members of mine. Yaoyorozu explains. Really? Jiru tilts her head. Last week, my parents saw some folks on the television that they almost mistook as one of their distant cousin. And after some research, we realized just yesterday that they're actually one of my parents' deceased cousin's children. She smiles warmly at the gift. Wow, it's so cool that you managed to find some floating family out there. 𝗂𝐴𝐺 squeals, but it's a bit troubling. 𝗂𝐴𝐫 admits, they're a part of a big organization that's a bit gray, and we have no way of contacting them. So until we manage to, we have this tea for them. She explains, well, I think you'll find them. Atsushi smiles. Who knows, they could be closer than you think. 𝗂𝐴𝐫 blinks before she brightens. Right. Atsushi nods before looking over to the door opening. I have to go. You kids continue studying and training for finals, you hear. He smiles. We will. He hangs up on the video call before turning his head to see Ryunosuke and Jin walking over. Ryunosuke glanced at him and Atsushi just smiled. Got any calls recently? Junk emails, for the most part. Well, I think you'd be interested in what I just learned. He's asleep. Todoroki blinks at the sight, seeing Atsushi fast asleep on the video call. Man, I wish I could join him. Studying is so hard. Kaminari grumbles miserably. Come on, we're almost done. 𝗂𝐴𝐫 smiles encouragingly. Nakajima-san, wake up. You have to rest in bed. Uraraka tries. Nothing. Do you think we should shout? Jiro asks. Maybe blast music. Shiro suggests. That's not a good idea. Midoriya waves his hands. One time when I surprised Nakajima-san awake, he threw me onto a tree and had to get me down. Everyone all stared at him before looking back at the sleeping detective. Suddenly there was a click of the door, and after a moment, a sigh, although it was slightly exasperated. Seriously, do you ever sleep at night, Atsushi? The voice continued muttering until someone came over and placed headphones on his head and a blanket over his shoulders. And abruptly, the video call ends. Midoriya blinked. Could have gone worse, at least, Todoroki points out. All right, you two ready? Atsushi grins. The camera shaky as Midoriya and Enko wait eagerly. We're ready, Midoriya exclaims. Atsushi smiles and turns the camera to Yokohama's skyline, the sun just beginning to set. Whoa, Midoriya whispers, him and Enko gazing at the place. Welcome to Yokohama, you two, Atsushi says, a smile being heard behind the camera. It's so gorgeous, Atsushi-kun, Enko exclaims, almost tearing up at the sight. Yeah, during my time in Musutafu, I never really knew how much I would miss seeing the sights. When I asked Kunikida-san, he said that Yokohama actually is best known for their beautiful sights, such as this. I could imagine. Man, Ashido, Kirishima, and Kaminari would do anything to take a selfie with that sunset. Midoriya smiles. One can dream, kid. Atsushi sighs wistfully. Wait until it's a full moon. It's like a natural light show. You better show us when we get to see you in person, then. Midoriya grins. Great, it's a promise. Atsushi smiles brightly. Tomorrow's finals. I'm stressing so much right now. Kaminari shrieks. You kids will be fine, don't worry. Atsushi assures. Your coworker's a real lifesaver, though, Midoriya added. Atsushi just grins and looks over. They appreciate the help, Kunikida-san. Silent. Then a fist holding a thumbs up appeared on the screen and they laughed. But really, you kids don't have to worry too much. You've done all the cramming you could. Atsushi reassures them. But if we don't pass the finals, we won't go on that camping trip happening during summer break. Ashido cries. Atsushi blinks and tilts his head. And this won't be that logical ruse your teacher pulls on you all, right? Almost everyone stared at him. Atsushi stares back before humming. But now that I said it, he likely won't. So you best study, you all. He cheekily smiles. Don't do that, we're panicking more. In the end, it was a logical ruse. Some freeloaders in our territory. Shuya echoes and Higuchi nods her head. Shuya clicked his tongue and placed some papers down. Freeloaders in the sense they will bring danger to the city or freeloaders in the underground. He asks, much danger, as they're situated underneath a populated part of the city. Shuya frowned heavily and sighed in annoyance. This means we have to reschedule our weekly dinner with the others. The others cast a slight sheepish and pitiful expression, as the man before them was already miserable from having to work overtime. I think it's best that we do. We could work quickly if we ask for their assistance, Kuyu said. Shuya hums and looks at Jin and Takahara, who bow their heads and leave to the hunting dogs and the armed detective agency. He sighed heavily and leaned back on his chair, glare hardening on the ceiling. If they decide to put filth into our territory, they'll have something more coming right at them, he growled. He stood up and grabbed on his coat. Ain-san, you know what to do. The woman nods and they leave the office. Before Chuya closed the door, he turned around to stare out the windows overlooking the city skyline. Something big is happening, and the most we can do is protect our home. This camping trip was only supposed to be a getaway from all that's been happening, but also hone in on their skills and continue training. But in less than a week, the villains had launched an attack on their camp, kidnapped Bakugo, and revealed who could be the big boss of the League of Villains, all for one. and wanting to save his friend. Midoriya wanted to go and save him with Kirishima. Now there he sat in a train with Kirishima, Shoto, Yaoyorozu, and Ada, all of them following the tracking device the Ravenet managed to create with her quirk. We're close, we get off at the next stop. Yaoyorozu tells them. What's the next stop? Kirishima asked. Kamino Ward of Yokohama City, she responds. Midoriya, Todoroki, and Ada blink. Yokohama City. Midoriya echoes. Yes, she nods. And that means we do have some help after all. Midoriya grins, pulling out his phone. Wait, seriously? Kirishima asks in confusion as Midoriya nods, putting his phone on speaker. Midoriya-kun, Nakajima-san. Kirishima and Yaoyorozu's eyes widen in shock. Are you free right now? We need your help. Are you at Kamino Ward? Midoriya asked, letting the others listen. Whoa, hang on, one at a time, Midoriya-kun. Kamino Ward. Do you mean Naka Ward? Atsushi asks. I suppose. What's the upcoming station? Midoriya asked, looking at the rest. Sakurajicho Station, responds Ada. The bullet train station. The other voice rings on the other end. Fortunately, I'm close. But I can't move. Me and the others are dealing with an issue. But I can send someone to get you. You might figure out who one of them is. We'll try. Midoriya nods. But before you do that, I need to ask for the concerns of Yokohama. What are you doing? Midoriya yelps and glances at the others who all had varying answers. Kirishima adamantly stared at him. Yaoyorozu looks terrified, Ada conflicted, but Todoroki just nodded his head. As something happened during our camping trip. Villain attack. Why yes, any form of kidnapping and or harm to anyone and or everyone. They stole one of the pro heroes' quirk. And yes, some of us got hurt. We've been discharged from the hospital, though. But our classmate, Bakugo, he got kidnapped by them. Silence. Don't tell me you kids are doing something similar to what you did back at Hasu, sighed the other. Instantly Midoriya, Ada, and Todoroki glance away. Nakajima-san, if you're going to try and stop us, I'm sorry but I can't let you. Our friend's in trouble, we gotta save him. Kirishima said firmly. Calm down, I'm not. Atsushi sighs for a moment. The air tense amongst the students. You kids are entering very protected territory by the framework. You all promise not to use your quirks in violence. He asks. We promise. We all agreed that we want this to be a rescue mission. No quirks. Yaoyorozu said. Good. I'll go ask them to meet up with you. If this is anything with that League of Villains, then we might have a bigger problem in our hands. And by our, I mean mine. Atsushi sighed heavily. You kids, be on your best behavior. Do not engage in any combat. Got it. Yes, sir. What did I say about calling me that? I didn't know that Nakajima-sen lived in Yokohama. But what's that framework thing he mentioned? Kirishima asked as they got off the bullet train. We're not so sure ourselves, answers Midoriya. But Nakajima-sen's part of it, so that could mean something, right? Yaoyorozu frowns, looking at her phone. Tripartite framework. A three-organization framework created to keep the peace of Yokohama City since a great war decades ago. She reads, the Hunting Dogs, Armed Detective Agency, and the Port Mafia. Mafia. Ada hisses. They all walked out to the station just in time for a loud explosion. What the? I said before, I'm saying it again. You kids shouldn't be here. They are still instantly at the voice, whirling around to see a Ravenet glaring them down. Another standing next to him raised their hands. They're Atsushi's kids. And besides, they're here to help. They can't help. They can't use their quirks here in Yokohama. The Ravenet grumbles and the other just rolled their eyes before holding up a whiteboard. Sorry about him. He's been a grump since we had to reschedule our weekly dinner with everyone. It's okay. We apologize. Yaoyorozu stares at the Ravenet for a moment, confused for a moment. Another explosion. And they whip towards the smoke. They can handle themselves, the man said and looked at them. You five, unfortunately, plans have changed, and your friend's been taken elsewhere. Wait, hang on. Who are Midoriya began but stopped at the gold glint of their earring and silver eyes. They glared and sighed to themselves before turning away. The masked individual giggled behind her hand and signed. Come on, you aren't jealous about these kids, are you? I am not. He sighs harshly and starts walking. The students looked at each other before looking at the Ravenet who waved a reassuring hand with the whiteboard. He's not that good with socializing, but knows that you kids mean a lot. They blink before nodding their heads and they continue along. Behind them, another explosion, followed by a loud roar that practically made the entire ground shake. GRRR, what are those heroes doing? Running in like that? Teruko yells as she and her comrades and a few of the agency's detectives were taking care of the onslaught of attacks. They're practically going to destroy the entire city. Taku grits his teeth. That, or that tiger. It was true. Even with the help of the police force and some heroes, Byako was tearing through the Naumus that slinked out of what looked like liquid metal warps. You heroes, take this fight outside our territory. Giano yells. You don't tell us what to do, dog. Endeavor yelled back at him. And I've stopped listening to you, old man. Giano growled and they resumed fighting back the Naumus. You take your problem to us. Huh, how pathetic. 𝗧𝗪𝗀 glared and firmly kicked back a 𝗓𝗲𝗄, which in turn got blasted by Sigma's gun, the two sharing a nod before resuming the fight. Demon Snow, cover 𝗧𝗪𝗏𝐿's blind spot. Kyoyuka instructs. Her phantom instantly reappeared just behind the tiger, unsheathing their katana and slicing a 𝗓𝗄. Byakko roared loudly and slashed at another 𝗓𝗄 that was about to hit Kyu, growling. Another explosion. And they whipped their heads just to see Kagi grinning, the air filled with citrus instantly. Good, that damn 𝗓𝗄 factory's done. 𝗧𝗪𝗀 turned her attention to the 𝗓𝗄 horde before them. Time to go full out. It was a bit of a risk, letting those kids continue with their rescue mission. But it was the best they could do to save their classmate and leave the premises of the fight. At the sight of them flying overhead, Ryunosuke unleashes Rashomon and apprehends all the villains there, turning his head to see Jin skillfully pull the injured heroes a safe distance. Turning back, he spots just faintly the sparkles of light snow. In seconds, it washed overhead, hiding them from the real fight. A hassle, he coughed behind his head, Rashomon's hold on the villains tightening to make them stop squirming. Thou shalt not die. Butterflies filled the air, surrounding those of the injured. You weren't kidding that those heroes cause great property damage, frowned Yasano as Ranpo hummed. To be honest, I was expecting it to be bigger. He comments. I wouldn't put it past it. She frowned. Looking back, the evacuation was a success, I presume. Ranpo nods his head. With the help of Po and Lucy, we managed to relocate them in a short amount of time. But still, this destruction will forever scar our home. Yasano hums in agreement, looking around. Those kids Atsushi took care of. Have they returned safely? Not yet. Byakko's still being protective, so Dazai had to go and find him with Chuya. And because of our efforts of evacuating the civilians, those rescue heroes don't really have anything to do than just see the devastation of our home. Yasano hummed and sighed heavily. Hope they know of the long meeting they're going to face with us. Oh, they're preparing. Boop. A bright light consumed the tiger, rings of kanji surrounding them just from a mere tap on the nose from Dazai. The light morphed, small and smaller, until it all broke away, revealing Atsushi. Ryunosuke reaches out and catches him, sighing heavily. Don't move, you're exhausted. Ryunosuke told them, feeling the younger try and move. The kids are being safely returned back to Musutafu, no need to worry. The villains have been apprehended, and all for one has been defeated, Dazai says, resting a hand on silver white hair. Unfortunately, it came with a price. The radius of their fight was much more. They were aware of the massive property damage heroes tend to have when in a fight, but they practically decimated that part of the district, rendering it unrecognizable. Unfortunately, we would need to speak to the commission about this, allowing their heroes to waltz into our territory and bring their trouble here. Chuya growled as he walked over to them. Ho, are they going to get the gravel talk? Dazai asked, eyes filling eagerly. Oh, they're getting more than a gravel talk. Chuya glared. Ryunosuke just sighed and looked at Atsushi, dazed eyes staring at the broken city. Come on, hoisting the other onto his back. Rashomon wrapped around his arms for support. Ryunosuke turned away with Dazai and Chuya watching them go, having to stay and see the damage in its entirety. Let's get you some rest. It shouldn't have gone that easy. 𝗧𝗪𝗀 whispers, sitting on the chair and contemplating life. The HPSC agreed with everything you set down on the table? Ryunosuke asked, eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Yes, I think. It could be a trap though. Did we just get scammed? Takahara asked, looking at Tanizaki, who he was sharing earbuds with as they reviewed the many-hour-long audio log of the meeting, trying to make sense of it. Were we talking with the HPSC, or are they people acting to be the HPSC? 𝗧𝗪𝗀 asks. They sound reluctant, commented Tanizaki. To be expected, gruffed Chuya. Did we forget to mention that the meeting was being broadcasted, especially to the families that had their homes destroyed? Likely because with so many eyes and such negativity amongst our people towards the commission and their heroes, the HPSC realized they messed with an even higher form of power, as we are practically on par with the government. So they're trying to appease the people so that they can have faith in the heroes. Atsushi blinked, confused. If anything, seeing them this desperate to right the wrongs, it's pitiful that now of all times the HPSC does something right. And even though us people in Yokohama are practically insane, at least we have brain cells. Everyone saw through them. They don't give a shit about their apologies. Deku's finger twitched and Kenji looks at him and pats his arm, reassuring, offering a smile. Their heroes will help with the reconstruction of our destroyed home as some sort of agreement that we won't do the same to them. Tanizaki gawks, and in comes Ranpo, shutting that down with the fact that Atsushi has done nothing but help and prevent such disasters. Takahara snaps his fingers and gestures to the screen. Tanizaki raises an eyebrow before his eyes instantly sparkle. Takahara laughs. Let's go, Ranpo. Rostem, shut them down. Had to for the snacks. If I wasn't a detective, I would have been one ruthless lawyer. Ranpo grins cheekily, tossing another gummy in his mouth and happily handing a few to Po. So they're going to help with the reconstruction and compensation for the people? Atsushi asks. Yup. We have already found those old blueprints of the buildings. We just hope that they build it in the way that people like, unlike their modernized cities. 𝗧𝗏 responds. Atsushi blinks before humming, relaxing slightly. This disturbance drew the attention of the government as well. And let's just say we had to ban Ango from the coffee machine for a few days. 𝗏𝗃𝗫 adds. Atsushi sheepishly smiles. Any news from the kids? 𝗔𝗵𝗲 inquires. Well, their teachers are coming to their homes in regards to a new dorm system they're implementing. You gotta be fucking with me. Shuya gawked, Kuyu already glaring. I don't know what's going on in their heads, unfortunately. Why they think dorms would be a good idea in the name of their students' safety. Atsushi sighed, shaking his head. I've talked to their principal numerous times, and let me tell you, he's like another 𝗧𝗏, or Ranpo, or both combined. Oh, 𝗧𝗏 looked at him with sparkling eyes, but Atsushi instantly flicked his forehead. No, I am not letting the two of you meet. Oh, Atsushi-kun, want me to do it again? Atsushi huffs indignantly, and Ryunosuke masked a smirk behind a cough, all while Chuya didn't hide it at all and burst out laughing. 𝗧𝗏 pouted and jabbed the ginger's side. All right, you two. Fukuzawa sighed before they could devolve into some sort of bickering. For now, all we can do is help those who are affected, and hopefully, those heroes are able to do their part in helping our city. We are talking about a really biased system with even more biased people they've licensed. I think it's best that we take all the help we get, even begrudgingly, Ryunosuke said. Atsushi simply looked at him before letting out a chuckle as the others began making plans and looked at the hologram device buzzing. Take it. He looks at Ryunosuke. It's likely the kids. Atsushi stares before nodding his head and pulling it out, walking to a different part of the room from the chaos. He rests the device and answers. They didn't know what they were thinking, deciding to watch the archived conference between the HPSC and Yokohama's Special Division of Unusual Powers and Tripartite Framework once they'd finished their work and had several hours of class time in their hands. God, that framework and special division were terrifying. And I thought Nezu was. Ashido shudders. Yokohama, Uraraka whispers, staring at the paused screen of the extent of the city's destruction upon the daylight. So Yokohama did have people with quirks, Zero murmurs. But with how they explained it, can we really call it quirks? A subpart of a quirk, Ajiro asks. Midoriya stared at the screen as it showed the devastated section of Yokohama City, and he looked down. And our sole goal as the framework is to protect the people of our city. Atsushi's voice echoes in his mind, the man's smile evident in his memory. Protect the people of the city. He whispers under his breath. Midoriya-kun. Todoroki glances at him. Silently, he pulls out the hologram device and rests it on the table and presses it. It was a few seconds until a screen pops up and Atsushi blinks to see them all. Oh, hey. Didn't expect to see all of Class 1A. I thought you all were still taking care of it yourselves since that training camp. Why are you calling me during class? I'm sorry, Nakajima-san. Silence. Atsushi stared in shock at Midoriya. The boy's head bowed down. Midoriya-kun. What brought this up? Atsushi asked, concerned. The boy stayed quiet for a moment before saying, I guess, to say sorry on behalf of the heroes. Midoriya, Uraraka utters, looking at the boy with his classmates. Atsushi just stared before sighing. You shouldn't be the one to apologize, Midoriya-kun. But you tried all you could to protect the city you swore to protect. Midoriya looks at him. Atsushi frowned before sighing. Wouldn't be the first time something or someone tried to destroy this place, to be honest. He comments, and, yes, even with the little time we had to prepare, there weren't any casualties, and if the HPSC lives up to their word, they'll help with the reconstruction of the destroyed buildings and compensate those who were affected. Atsushi looks at them sincerely. You kids were just doing what you could with the law in mind, this time. Managed to get your friend out of danger's way. And all for one has been apprehended. Unfortunately, we can't get him to return the quirks he stole, and I understand that it would be a huge change for those people. I just wished we could have done more, Midoriya said. And that's something you brats shouldn't have to worry about. They all flinched, and Atsushi whips his head to look at Ryunosuke, who sat down next to him, his arms folded and looking at them with an impassive glare that was similar to their teachers. You all are heroes in training, high schoolers, and teenagers. You shouldn't have to deal with that. Atsushi just sighs and looks back at the class. Really, you don't have to worry. Of course, this would lead to our talks being less as we have to put all our efforts into rebuilding our city. You kids did all you can. But right now, you should focus on your studies and improving yourselves. He smiles. Got it. Midoriya stares before smiling. Yes, sir. Stop calling me that. Atsushi screeches while Ryunosuke hides a smirk behind his hand. It truly didn't take them long for them to rebuild the affected area. In just a week, the buildings were finished, and in just a few days they helped the affected civilians be rehomed and were given compensation. What a relief, sighs Tanizaki, finally able to relax in their office. Surprised they worked this efficiently in clearing the rubble and effortlessly constructed the buildings as if nothing had changed, including the streets. Kunikata agrees. But that's good. meant that the meeting wasn't actually a scam, chuckles Atsushi. What does this mean now, though? Yasuno inquires, and Atsushi tilts his head. Because of our finished negotiations, you can return to your post at Musutafu, she explains. Atsushi blinks and hums in thought, thinking, maybe it'll be nice to see the kids and check up on them. I'm coming with you. Atsushi flinched and whipped his head around to see Ryunosuke at the windowsill. Are you sure? What about your work? Atsushi asked. I spoke with Chuya-san and boss about this. With the help of the hunting dogs, I had already received a hero license as well, but similar to yours, I'm an underground hero. Ryunosuke explains. I feel like you've planned this for a while. Atsushi comments. He did. Ranpo chimed. All the way back when you were first stationed in Musutafu, specifically. Dazai specifies with a smile. Atsushi blinked and looked at Ryunosuke, who was ready to strike the two detectives down himself, his ability all but just making a gesture of trying to stop herself from laughing. He couldn't help but chuckle and look back. Thank you for coming at such short notice upon your arrival, Nakajima, and welcome to Musutafu, Akutagawa. Nezu smiles at the two as they stand next to the principal, overlooking some new buildings just outside of the school building. Thank you, Nezu. Atsushi smiles while Ryunosuke just blinked at the principal. Is he the one that is both Dazai-san and Ranpo combined? He whispers. Atsushi just chuckles and rests a hand on his shoulder before facing the principal. It has been a long time since we have talked. Apologies that neither of us were in that meeting. I could imagine that you were there as well for the conference. He apologizes. No need to worry. While it would have been a happy feeling to see you again, it wouldn't be professional given the circumstances of those times. Nezu said. Those the dorms the students moved into a few days ago. Ryunosuke asks, turning his attention away. Yes, that's correct. And I suppose that your folks think this was an odd and stupid idea, yes? Nezu asks. Atsushi blinked and frowned slightly. Ryunosuke, on the other hand, nodded. Chuya-san is worried that this won't make much of a difference in protecting the students. The Ravenet explains. But I suppose you are right in feeling that way. They turned to look out the window and towards the buildings, all that had been built by the Heights Alliance in a matter of 3 days. Could they have been the one to also help with Yokohama's reconstruction? We wish that these dorms, yes, ensure the safety of our students, but to also bottleneck an old problem of ours, one that you've warned us months ago, Nakajima. Atsushi blinks before humming. The third party. Correct. We have received news that the incident at the camping trip was also a result of said third party revealing their locations to the villains. Nezu explains. Atsushi looked down while Ryunosuke frowned, meaning that the people at the campsite are candidates. Atsushi frowns. Correct. And as much as it pains me to say that, my staff and even the students are suspected. Nezu looks at them. You shouldn't. Ryunosuke piped up. You are the principal. And when it comes to protecting your students, you can't be biased and leave stones unturned. He gestures at Atsushi. I wouldn't even be surprised if you suspected my husband in the beginning. We've all dealt with this sort of thing where the authorities called were the actual suspect. But thankfully, given that you weren't at the training camp at the time, you are off the suspected list and were truly a trusted detective. Nezu smiles and continues. This is why we won't do a public investigation and figure things out behind the scenes. And I hope you can lend us a hand, Nakajima. Atsushi looks at him in confusion, and Nezu simply smiles. I trust your judgment and lay down what's right better than the HPSC or even myself. Ryunosuke glances at him and nudges the other, and Atsushi hums, nodding his head. You have my word, Nezu. But for now, Atsushi turns his head to the dorms. We should let them relax. A lot has happened, and I could tell there's a lot of things they need to talk about to get their mind off of what happened. He said, Of course. Nezu nods his head in agreement. As thank you, you are welcome onto our campus whenever. That's a bit of a stretch. Atsushi stammers. Yes, but you have gotten acquainted with the affected Class 1A. Not to mention it'll be easier to come speak to me regarding some work. Nezu explains. Ryunosuke rests a hand on Atsushi's shoulder and the detective looks at him before smiling, calming down. All right, thank you for your generosity, Nezu. He bows his head. Ryunosuke smirked and relaxed his shoulders as well, lowering his hand. Your husband, as well. Ryunosuke stared blankly, but Atsushi just laughs and nods his head. Thank you, Nezu. Seems like they're not here. Atsushi surmises after knocking for the third time and no one answering the doors to Class 1A dorms. He sighed and went to sit with Ryunosuke on the steps and glanced over to see. Where did that come from? Atsushi uttered, staring at the box in Ryunosuke's hand as they headed down to the dorms once school was done. Rashomon hid it. 𝗲𝗏 herbal tea shipped all the way from France. Chuya-san's suggestion tea. Atsushi perks up. Oh right, Yaoyorozu. Ryunosuke nodded his head and sighed quietly. Me and Jin thought about it when you told us. We decided to look into it. And we are actually related. Distantly, though. Atsushi tilts his head curiously and Ryunosuke sighed. One of her parents' cousins was one of my and Jin's parents. Whoa, that is distant, Atsushi murmurs. 𝗵𝗃 was quiet before looking at him. How does she act? Atsushi blinks and thinks about it. Bouncy and hospitable. Think of the big sister type. She's always looking out for others and cares about them. Atsushi responds. I think she and Jin would get along well. 𝗵𝗃 gazes at him before looking at the box of tea. Besides, you all are tea fanatics. You'll fit right in, Atsushi adds, nudging the other's shoulder and smiling at him reassuringly. You are, too. Huh, you're my husband, 𝗵𝗃 states. You're also a part of the family. Atsushi stares at him for a moment before he smiles warmly. Nakajima-san, Nakutagawa. They turn their heads to see the students of Class 1 barreling over. Kids, Atsushi beams, getting up and meeting them halfway. 𝗵𝗃 just smiled at the sight. You could have just invited yourselves in, Midoriya said as they all gathered in the kitchen for lunch. Still, I'd rather not invade your privacy. Atsushi waves his hands. Have you returned to your station, Nakajima-san? Todoroki asks, taking a bite out of his food. Yup, and Ryu came along with me this time. The reconstruction back home went quicker than we thought. After reharming the affected families, I was given the option to return back here. He explains. He still has some unfinished cases. 𝗵𝗃 added from where he sat, Rashomon eyeing some cake across the table. What about you, Akutagawa? Midoriya tilts his head curiously. Almost everyone turned their head to the newcomer who was more or less content in watching. Under their gaze, 𝗵𝗃 just sighed and resumed eating. Someone's got to watch the Jinko's back, he responds with a shrug. Midoriya blinked before humming, nodding his head in understanding. And, Atsushi leans towards him, smirking knowingly. 𝗵𝗃 sighs again and reaches out for a slice of cake while Rashomon happily picks up the box of tea and holds it to Yaoyorozu. For you. The girls all gasp while Yaoyorozu picks up the box, staring at it before her eyes sparkle. Shipped all the way from France. 𝗵𝗃 glanced at the girl and quietly nodded. Are you two related? Todoroki asks. Oi, don't bring your theories to the dinner table. Bakugo began. Yes, 𝗵𝗃 interrupts, ignoring the exploding blonde. Yaoyorozu stares before a big smile graces her face. Wait here, she exclaims and hurries off. 𝗵𝗃 blinks and looks at Atsushi, who smiles encouragingly. Here. He looks back to see a box of tea. Yaoyorozu was beaming, and 𝗵𝗃 blinked before nodding slightly, Rashomon taking the box. Atsushi just smiles at the sight before feeling a nudge from Midoriya. He had a knowing smirk on his face, and Atsushi just rolled his eyes and ruffled his hair. So you were here to speak with the principal? Midoriya asked once they settled down. Atsushi hums, nodding his head. After what had happened and some other things, I think Nezu practically hired me as an on-campus detective, or at least one that UA can fully trust with their investigations. That makes sense. So you're allowed in and out of the gates? Ajiro asks. We assume. Atsushi looks over at 𝗵𝗃, who nodded his head that, yes, they're allowed. We're staying at my previous accommodation that is outside campus. Atsushi chuckled before thinking for a moment. Oh, right. I remembered something else Nezu informed me. You kids are preparing for some sort of exam, right? He asks. Yup, our provisional license exam. Uraraka smiles. Provisional license. 𝗵𝗃 murmurs, taking a drink of his tea and not minding their stares when Rashomon placed another sugar cube inside the cup. From what I remember, it's the exam that gives you your license and authorization to use your quirks without a pro hero's permission. Correct. Yup, Kaminari grins, which some of you have broken at least twice. Sheepish glances. Ryu, come on, give them some slack. Atsushi nudged the other and 𝗵𝗃 just smirked and continued. What consists this exam of yours? Different from our finals or entrance exams, it's more about combat and rescues. Midoriya explains. Oh, rescue missions. Atsushi perks up and smiles. Well, all I have to say to you kids is that when you get your licenses, please don't abuse it. And I beg you, please don't get in trouble right off the bat. We won't, sir. 𝗵𝗃 coughed over his tea, covering his mouth as he stopped himself from laughing with the students at Atsushi's disgusted expression and the following shriek after, Stop calling me sir, I'm still young. 𝗵𝗃 had a sense that something was happening this night. It had been a long day for the students and their exams. From what he could tell, almost all of Class 1 passed the exam, save for two, Bakugo and Todoroki, who have a chance to retake it in 3 months. But something was amidst this situation. When coming to Musutafu and settling down in Atsushi's previous accommodation, they decided it was best that they keep the same rhythm similar to their occupations as an armed detective agency and port mafia member, meaning that Atsushi can continue working during the day and no longer relinquish a good night's sleep, and 𝗵𝗃 can work in the shadows of night and not be blinded by the deadly laser in the sky called the sun. So after making sure that Atsushi was fast asleep after almost running around the city and helping people, 𝗵𝗃 takes to the school. When Atsushi had told him before, he was expecting it to be as big as, possibly, 𝗬𝗪𝗏 City. But it was possibly more bigger than that if you take into account their numerous training areas. Just as 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 rounded the main building and caught sight of the dorms, he whipped his head left at the sound of destruction, and given the location of the bright lights and faint shouting and yelling, it was coming from ground beta, a villain attack. Using Rashomon, 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 came to the training grounds effortlessly, his ability taking to the buildings of its area. And further below, he sees a large cloud of dust but not that much destruction, either a villain or a fight. But amidst the cloud of debris, he spots two figures, Midoriya and Bakugo. He frowned at the sight and went in for a closer look, keeping himself hidden. From what Atsushi had mentioned, the two boys had known each other since middle school and before UA. They were childhood friends, until supposedly they have obtained their quirks. Or, well, Bakugo obtained his quirk. It's a no-brainer on 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏's part that Midoriya was given a quirk after seeing the boy in action. But who? Well, given the fact that there was actually another person having listened to their fighting, 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 could simply tell that this was a fight to really settle things between two friends and rivals. Jealousy, he found himself saying. Almost instantly all heads turned to look at him. Akutagawa. Midoriya panics. Wait, don't tell me that Jinko's not here. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 walked over and joined them. It seems that you are going through a similar dilemma that I had years ago. Really now? Toshinori inquires. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 was quiet, looking at the man with an impassive stare. Suddenly, Rashomon shoots out and snatches the two boys. This isn't about me tonight. Midoriya, I thought Jinko told you not to get in trouble after your exam. And Bakugo, you used your quirk without permission. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 looked at Toshinori expectantly. Aizawa is aware. We'll likely meet up with him at their dorm building, he said. Please don't call Nakajima-san. Midoriya pleads, sheepishly smiling. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 simply looked at the boy and pulled out his phone as he resumed walking. What did I just say? A harsh flick on the forehead. And instantly Midoriya was keeling over while Bakugo tried to stay strong. Before them, Atsushi, with his ears pressed against his head, tail lashing, slitted pupils, and faint eye bags, simply looked done with the world. It is the night just after your exams. One of you passed, the other didn't. But at this point, whatever happens next could most likely blow your next chance of retaking the exams in 3 months' time. Atsushi bristles, truly like a cat. Aizawa utters, watching the scene unfold. I'm a tiger. Atsushi growled like one, whipping his head to look at them. This time, black stripes began taking shape on his face and arms, nails sharpening. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 frowned. Jinko, quiet down. You might end up roaring and wake up the entire dorm, maybe more. Atsushi continued growling before it quieted down slightly and looked at them. Rashomon reaches out and tightly wraps around the tired detective, practically dragging him back to his side and motioning for the other two to wreak their havoc on the boys. You two fought and got house arrest. Their classmates exclaim. And you actually made Nakajima-san angry. Ida adds, SHH. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 glared at them and they instantly froze up. It was late into the night, and both me and Jinko already scheduled that I would take night shift. But since this fight involved Midoriya, who he practically took in, I had to call him unfortunately. Glancing at the sleeping man, he may be a tiger and they're nocturnal, but his current sleep schedule has been drilled into him since childhood. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 looks back at them. Even so, don't give your classmates a hard time, and get to class or else your teacher might do the same to you all. Understood. Almost instantly their classmates relayed they did, said their goodbyes to Midoriya and Bakugo, and raced to the main building. It was quiet before Midoriya glanced at the Ravenet. Akutagawa, about last night. What did you mean you had a similar dilemma? He asked, turning off the vacuum. And even though he didn't show it, Bakugo was interested as well. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 was quiet and leaned back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. A decade ago, my mentor was 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏. 2 years later, he abandoned us and the Port Mafia and joined the Armed Detective Agency in 2 years. And 5 years ago, he took in Jinko in the Armed Detective Agency. He closes his eyes. I've always sought out for 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏's approval, getting stronger in any way I could, but I never really got it. More in the sense that 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 went ahead and bragged about Jinko being more superior than I was. Jinko, a newbie detective within just a week of stepping into Yokohama. I had 6 years under my belt at that time. 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 would say that to you. Midoriya frowned in worry. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 just glanced away and continued. Since that day, I despised Jinko. I didn't get what he saw in him. 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 taught us both differently, implementing a mindset of murder in my head. Jinko, on the other hand, had someone else drill his own mindset into his. Midoriya frowned in worry and 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 sighed again. If there isn't someone worth saving for, then why live? He recalls along similar lines. Did you fight? Bakugo asked, sounding disinterested. But really, him asking the question counted in him being interested. Regardless, 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 just smirked. We were rival organizations before the truce and change years ago. Didn't that 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 𝐔𝐸𝐽 tell you before? I've cut this man's leg off more than it was stabbed. Instantly the two stare at the 𝗵𝗃𝗏, who continued, of course, it'll always come back. Damn tiger, negating every injury and wound. How to say you're part of a mafia body without saying you're part of the mafia. Midoriya murmurs. So what did this 𝗧𝗏 do? Made his partner up. Huh? Midoriya gawks with 𝗵𝘃𝗲. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏 glared at them instantly, the two falling silent when Atsushi stirred. It was a heartbeat and a half, but soon enough Atsushi resumed sleeping, letting the boys let out a sigh of relief. My time partnered with 𝗵𝗃𝗁. In a sense it made me look at the world in a new light. But you're a mafioso. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 glared. And us folks in the mafia take promises seriously. So what? He made you promise not to kill anyone for what, 6 months? Yes. They stared at 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏. If I managed to not kill anyone in 6 months, we would fight. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏 glances at Atsushi as he lets out a chuff-like snore. I took the challenge with the idea of proving to him that I could do it, but back then, I never realized how hard it was. Because all you did was kill people. Midoriya asked. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏 nodded his head and thought for a moment. Maybe that's why Dazai-sen made me team up with 𝗵𝗃𝗁 from the start. I've only ever used Rashomon offensively, not defensively. The two stare before Midoriya hums, smiling. So even after those 6 months and all that, you continued to stay as partners? Midoriya asked. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏 looks at them before huffing. Yes, we stayed rivals. And in the sense, when the time comes to it and we need to be humbled, we can be in the present. But there's a reason why 𝗵𝗃𝗁 will tell you kids repeatedly to do what he says and not as he did. They look at him curiously. Needless to say, Dazai-san and Chuya-sen blurred the line of partnership and relationship. At least me and 𝗵𝗃𝗁 got our shit together more than those pining fools for a decade. They stared at the 𝗵𝗃𝗏 as he reached out and gently tucked his hair back, his silver earring glinting from the room lights. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏 gazes at it for a moment. Atsushi would likely still be cranky when he wakes up. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏 stands up and makes his way to the kitchen. Do you have stuff to make 𝐒𝐻𝗎𝗧𝗒? Maybe. Midoriya tilts his head. 𝐻𝗎𝗧𝗒. That's cheap as shit. In 𝗵𝗃𝗁's words, the cheaper it is, the better. And 𝗻𝗎𝗧𝗒 stays on top. Excuse me, is this Detective Nakajima? A somewhat stammered voice asks over the phone. Atsushi hums quietly, nodding his head. Yes, this is. Is it a case that you need help with? Why yes, I'm Kaoruko Iwata, hero named Bubble Girl. I'm a sidekick to Sir Night-Eye here, and we are in need of your assistance. Well, I don't have any current cases right now. So what do you need help with? It's regarding a Yakuza group named 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏. They're an underground group who illegally distributes trigger drugs that enhances one's quirk but weakens their reason. I've heard of that recently on the news, about 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 and some break-ins. Correct. And what I'm going to tell you is confidential, but from what we heard, you are a trusted detective from Yokohama to even UA High School. As so, if you can. No worries, I won't say anything. Please, continue. Right. We are under the impression that this group is developing quick-destroying bullets, but we're unsure on how far it goes or how it's actually being made. If you are willing, Nakajima, please help us look into this. And that's where Atsushi is, wandering the streets. In the back of his mind, he wished he was there with the kids, all of them preparing for upcoming hero work studies. But the thought of someone being used to make such a powerful thing, a quirk-destroying bullet, could they be using someone else's quirk for this? But that would mean he yelps when he bumped into something. Oh, there he turned around and instantly his eyes widened. A little girl in a somewhat ragged short-sleeved dress, long white hair, and a single horn to the right of her forehead, and terrified ruby-red eyes. But what made Atsushi stare were the sight of bandages. Almost instantly, everything clicked in his mind. And after listening to enough lessons from Yosano about the human body, DNA is seen in their blood. DNA that gives these people their quirks. Atsushi kneels down, his hands hovering close to her but not touching. Who knows what the hell she's been through? Hey, there. Hey, it's okay. Ruby red eyes looked up at him, and there was barely a light in them. Are you all right? That was quite the bump. He chuckles gently. The girl just blinked and nodded her head, looking down. Are you lost? He stands up and helps her up. If you want, I could take you to the nearby authorities. The girl was quiet, and for a split second she opened her mouth but nothing came out. She looked desperate, pleading. Atsushi frowned and just barely. He nodded his head. Come on, let's take you to the no need, sir. Almost instantly the girl freezes and Atsushi looks overhead and into the alleyway. Apologies if Eri was causing you any trouble. We got into a bit of an argument about some candies. I tried compromising with chocolates, but she didn't seem to like that. Atsushi looked at the man, his beak-like mask only covering the bottom part of his mouth. Who are you? The leader of the 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏. The hold on his sleeve tightened, and Atsushi glared, hugging the girl, Eri, tightly. The man looked at them with a careful eye before tilting his head. By any chance, sir, aren't you that detective from that port city? Yokohama, was it? Atsushi stiffened slightly before slowly nodding his head. Yes, that's correct. He answers slowly. He needs to tread carefully. "Ah, yes, their tiger," the man assumes. Atsushi frowned and held out his arms, waiting for her permission. Eri stares at him. "May I pick you up?" he asks verbally. She looked confused, conflicted. Instantly Atsushi felt the air spike in tension. "Your feet, little one. They look sore," he explains, gesturing to it. They were dirty and a bit battered. "Does she wear any shoes?" After managing to pick her up, Atsushi simply looks at the man, waiting. "Apologies for asking, but how did you know who I was?" "Well, it came with hoops," the man said, turning away and continuing down the alleyway. Atsushi hesitated, but he kept a firm hold on Eri and followed. No matter how much 𝗵𝗃 was growling in his ear to not and just make a run for it. But if this man was dangerous, if he were to run, that would mean endangering the people and the part of the city they were in. With what happened at Hasu, then to your city, and that streamed meeting between the HPSC and Yokohama's tripartite framework. Took some guessing, but we figured it out in the end. Atsushi frowned quietly. "And why are you telling me this?" he asked. The man was silent for a moment. "Tell me, do you have trouble controlling your quirk?" he asks. Atsushi raises an eyebrow. "This is a trap. I plead the fifth," he leisurely shrugs. "But we're in Japan." The man inquires. "Nope, I plead the fifth." Atsushi continues to deny answering. The man simply looked at him. "Well, how about some help?" Atsushi looked confused before sharply gasping when he felt a prick at the back of his neck, and instantly everything went black amidst his pain scream. One thing he forgot about this whole operation. Not only was he dealing with a possibly quirk-destroying bullet, but they had triggers on hand as well. And amidst the green haze in his mind, 𝗵𝗃 growled at the man's face, keeping Eri behind her paw. Now this is an interesting sight," the man murmurs. Instantly, he went to take off one of his gloves, but 𝗵𝗃 growled again, glaring at the man. The man simply stared into the jaws of the beast. "Then how about this? You come with me, and no one gets hurt. I'm an honest man, and I keep to my deals," he offers. 𝗵𝗃 growled at the man before her slitted eyes flickered to Eri, who shivered at the sight of the man's gloves. 𝗵𝗃 looked back for a moment, still growling, but letting out a huff, letting her irritation be known. "Good." The man went to Eri, but 𝗵𝗃 was quick, picking up the girl carefully at the back of her dress and placing her on her back. The man hummed at the sight before sighing. "I suppose that will do." They continued along the way. 𝗵𝗃 begrudgingly followed. Eri stared at the tiger before holding tightly, pressing her face into the soft white fur. "I'm sorry." Her voice was barely audible. As they ventured deep into the alleyway, they failed to notice something left behind, a silver earring next to a small device. The room was dark, voluntarily. Toys still in their boxes, strewn about the room. She simply laid in her bed, wanting to hide. And the only thing protecting her from those scary procedures was the tiger, the creature solemn and ethereal. Eri stares at its light blue glow, separating her from the door the masked people come into. "Why?" she whispers, looking at the tiger. They simply look at her before letting out a chuff and rests their head on the bed. "Careful, foolish little girl. You are in a constant state of danger. I'm simply protecting you." A voice suddenly echoes in her head. It sounded like two voices, a woman with a deep yet ethereal voice, but just barely Eri could hear the voice of the nice man from earlier. "I'm sorry. Feeling worthless won't help, little girl." The tiger gets up and turns around so that they were facing the door. "Little girl, rest. I will protect you." Eri stares at the large tiger before shifting closer. Carefully, she leans into the warm, fluffy fur. Slowly, her eyes slipped closed and she fell asleep, just in time for the door to open, bleeding light into the room. But the folks didn't enter the room, staring at the sight of the tiger. "Seems that we would need to pause operations until we can figure out how to get that tiger away from Eri," the man said. "Pause our operations. Don't worry, we still have the bullets we perfected. They'll make do for now. Is the Mr. okay?" Eri whispers, looking at the tiger's sharp yellow eyes, barely a hue of purple in her eye, which was concerning. "I'm unsure how to answer properly, little girl." The child's dormant silence. "I'm sorry I got you in this mess," she whispers. 𝗵𝗃 looks at her for a moment before huffing in exasperation and slight irritation. "Humans, you all act so different from the child, but act so similar," Eri gasped when the tiger brought up a paw and pulled her close until she was cradling the girl on her forearms. "The child is much like you, little girl, guilty for something you have no power in." 𝗵𝗃 was silent and gently rested her head on the girl's stomach. "But that only means you have a good heart, little girl." Eri was silent before hugging the tiger's head. "How long has it been?" she whispers. "I'm unsure, but you are tired, little girl." 𝗵𝗃 nudges the girl, gently at the horn protruding from the side of her forehead. "But you need sleep, too." Eri frowns in worry. "Your safety is my priority, little girl, as well as the child's." 𝗵𝗃 shifted, and now encircled the girl protectively. "For as long as I am awake, they won't harm you." A tail reaches over and rests over Eri's eyes. "Rest, little girl." Eri quietly stared at a page of a book, looking at some illustrations. 𝗵𝗃, "What is it, little girl? Is there someone up there that you care about?" 𝗵𝗃𝗀 was quiet, thinking it over. Several humans that the child is fond of. She flicks her ear, and then again. It felt lighter, drawing a paw over it. No ring. She huffs slightly and rests her head down. Memories of black and red, but just as gentle did it come down as murderous. Somehow, the tiger manages to scoff and shake the memory from a certain black dragon. And as brutish as she is, I miss her company. Who? Did 𝗵𝗃𝗀 say that out loud? No one, little girl. She denies instantly. The girl quietly stares at the tiger before looking back down at the book's illustrations, turning the page. It was quiet between them, 𝗵𝗃𝗀 keeping her eyes on the door. Do you hate it? Staying here? 𝗵𝗃𝗀 glances at the girl before resuming to look at the door. Yes, it reminds the child of his past. The only difference is that you have someone to protect you, little girl. But why? Because, I suppose, some humans are worth protecting. And you are, little girl. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 looks at her. So no matter where you are, I will protect you. 𝗬𝗏 gazed at the tiger for a moment before shifting over and hugged her neck. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 blinks, a memory and feeling hazy of similar arms reaching out and hugging her, stroking her fur. Warm sunset ametrine eyes flickered over quiet ruby red ones. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 blinks before chuffing lightly, bowing her head to rest gently in small bandaged arms. 𝗬𝗏 was gone. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 searched the room repeatedly, her growling getting louder and louder by the passing minutes. She whips around at the doors clicking open and sees a masked figure walk inside, 𝗬𝗏 curled up tightly in their arms. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 growled, pupils thinning, but the person let 𝗬𝗏 down and she stumbled over to hug 𝗵𝗃𝗀's leg, trembling. She growls and looks back at the person, but the door has already closed, shrouding them in darkness. The girl hiccups and buries her face into the fur. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 looks at the girl and brings her to the furthest wall from the door, curling around her in a way that blocks her sight of the door. Foolish little girl, what did they do to you? 𝗵𝗃𝗀 demands, but 𝗬𝗏 shakes her head and clings to her. I tried going out there again. I found heroes, but the girl pressed herself against the tiger. I tried to go, but he was going to hurt them. She whispers into the fur, trembling. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 gazes at her for a moment and huffs and pulls her close, calming the girl down with her nose. 𝗵𝗃𝗀's ears flick and she turns her head, growling. 𝗬𝗏 has barely gotten enough sleep, clinging to the tiger that practically took up the entire room. What's that sound? 𝗬𝗏 whispers, just barely hearing something above them. Footsteps. Many, from what I can hear above us. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 looked up at the ceiling before turning around and growled harshly at the sight of 𝗧𝗏𝗃 at the door. We need to get you two in a safer place. The place is soon to collapse due to unforeseen circumstances. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 growled, pupils thinning. Foolish liar. But 𝗬𝗏 gasped in fear at some sounds they could hear echoing down the hall. My, seems like the little one is scared. 𝗧𝗏𝗃 continues. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 glared before feeling a hand touch her fur. Please, just go with him. You might get hurt again. 𝗬𝗏 whispers just barely. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 looked at the man, still growling. But after what felt like a stare down, the tiger finally relented and followed the other. There was so much chaos, shouting, yelling. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 growled, pressing her ears down. You hear them within these tunnels, don't you? 𝗧𝗏𝗃 asks, and 𝗵𝗃𝗀's eyes flash towards him. They're here to take 𝗬𝗏 into the HPSC. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 was silent. So it's best she stays here, hidden. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 stayed silent. Is it worse for the little girl to be up above? 𝗬𝗏's hold on the tiger tightens. It was practically an endless hallway. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 made her annoyance known, snarling at 𝗧𝗏𝗃. Unfortunately, we have some unwanted visitors. Apologies for the long delay, dear guest. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 just looked at the man as they walked. And why act so cordial? She can see through that man. Human X, frustrating. Rocks changing and morphing. A break overhead from what could be explained as a dragon crashing down. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 growled, tensing herself as 𝗬𝗏 gasped sharply. Hiding back. Run, little girl. Go with those heroes, and don't look back. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 instructs her, looking back ahead to the figures fighting back the masked people and 𝗧𝗏𝗃. But, 𝗬𝗏 gasped sharply when she was suddenly swatted away. And she looked back in time to see rock spikes pierce the tiger. She roared furiously and looked at 𝗬𝗏. Go. The girl's eyes widened in fear and she staggered to her feet and ran over. And no, I can't leave you here, you'll die. And the mister, too. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 growled at her. Foolish little girl. Go with them. They are here to save you. You're their priority. Go with them. The ground beneath them shook. And 𝗵𝗃𝗀 roared after the girl when the ground shot up from beneath her and she was gone. It was exhausting. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 was exhausted. But even with her bleeding wounds she couldn't bother negating. She managed to climb out and scan the street. There was a boy hugging 𝗬𝗏 who was letting out feverish pants, her face getting red. 𝗬𝗏 roared, and the boy flinched around to see the tiger growling at him in warning. What the? Tiger. A huge one. Did the shy 𝗧𝗏𝗃 tiger nap it or something? 𝗵𝗃𝗀 growled at the boy who held 𝗬𝗏 tightly. Protect the girl. She roared and lunged at the boy, and they yelled out in panic. Her jaws snapped shut around something. The beeping was all that Atsushi could hear amongst the empty room. Staring at the ceiling overhead didn't really help either. How long have I been asleep? Atsushi rasped, glancing over to Ryunosuke sitting next to his hospital bed. 4 days, responded the Ravenite, putting away his phone. Tell me, what do you last remember? Atsushi hums in thought, lowering his arm. Just facing that man and wanting to protect Eri. He frowned slightly. I likely caused more trouble than help for those folks that called me. You didn't, Ryunosuke denies. But you gave me quite the wild goose chase to figure out where you've gone. I was gone. You were missing for at least a week. Atsushi hums in thought for a moment, thinking about it. Think this one deserves a rating. He lightly jokes with a tired smile. Ryunosuke just sighs, leaning over on his seat to look the other in the eye. They had the upper hand given we're in uncharted territory with different laws compared to Yokohama. So no, I won't allow you to rate it. A light tap on Atsushi's bandaged forehead, and the other just hums absent-mindedly. Ryunosuke raises an eyebrow before noticing that he was staring at the bandages wrapped around his arm peeking out from beneath his sleeve. He frowns heavily. Akutagawa-san. Standing between the boy and the tiger, Ryunosuke stood, his quirk wrapped around his arm, the same that was in the jaws of the beast. Akutagawa, what are you? Ryukyu shouts. Bayako. Midoriya blinks in confusion at the name. Ryunosuke manages to grimace out, ignoring the deepening bite of the beast. Reaching out with his free hand, he rests it on the tiger. Stop this rampage, Bayako. Chisaki and the Shy Hasekai have been apprehended. The fight's done. The girl's safe. At that, the tiger stops biting as hard. Was it protecting Eri? Midoriya looks down at the girl, clinging to Mirio's red cape. She's safe, Bayako. But Eri's coming down with a fever, and we need to take her in for further examination. Ryunosuke examined the tiger further and furrowed his eyebrow. You're exhausted, too. You can't even negate your own words. Bayako growled again. Eyes flaring and jaw tightening. Listen to me, Atsushi. The tiger instantly stopped and Midoriya's eyes widened. And Nakajima-san. Midoriya stares. No way. Uraraka whispers. The informant that went missing a week ago. Bubble Girl gasps, covering her mouth behind her air filter. No wonder Akutagawa was hellbent on being there for the aftermath of this chaos, Midoriya thought. Ryunosuke continued glaring at the tiger, softening when it unlocked its jaw from his arm and let out a pained moan, pressing their head against the Ravenite. The girl is safe, Ryunosuke insists. We've taken care of our priority. But now we need to look out for you. So please, turn back so we can take a look at your wounds. Atsushi. Bayako. A beat. Almost as if it's finally succumbed to the pain. The tiger collapses, Rashomon reaching out in time to catch them and resting them gently on the ground. You did your part. Now rest. Ryunosuke whispers, kneeling before the tiger and holding the tiger's head, gazing into yellow eyes. A moment later, they closed their eyes and Midoriya looked away from a sudden bright flash, slivers of light blue kanji drifting amongst the wind. And looking back, he sees Atsushi passed out in Ryunosuke's arms, his person with open wounds and others having stones embedded in them. The Ravenite sighs in relief and looks over his shoulder. Deku, take Eri to the ambulance for that fever and go with your classmates. I'll take care of Atsushi. The boy stares before nodding and gets onto his feet and runs off. Ryunosuke sighs and looks back at his husband. Gently, he pushes back their bangs and rests a kiss on his forehead before picking up the man with much care and walking towards one of the ambulances. Are they all safe? Ryunosuke snaps out of his memories from those few days ago and turns his attention back to Atsushi, who waited patiently for an answer. He recollects his thoughts and repeats the others' questions before answering. Everyone that participated in the raid is safe. Few took some heavy blows, but they're all right now. And Eri? Atsushi asks, worry hinted in his voice. Ryunosuke relaxes and looks at him earnestly. She's here in the hospital, quarantined for now, he said. She picked up a fever just after everything went down. Likely due to her letting out too much of her quirk. But she's here, safe and sound. Atsushi was quiet for a moment before he smiled warmly, closing his eyes for a brief moment. That's a relief, he whispers. Ryunosuke hums in agreement and reaches out to lace their fingers together, their rings glinting from the sunlight allowed in from the window. But what about you? How are you feeling? He asks. Atsushi looks at him before humming absent-mindedly. I feel normal, but not like myself, he admits. Ryunosuke raises an eyebrow, tilting his head slightly. Seeing his confusion, Atsushi elaborates. The fog. What? I can barely move myself, as if my strength has just vanished. I can't hear past the beeping of the machines. And for once, I can't see in the dark or smell the pudding you brought. Atsushi explains. Ryunosuke frowns and tightens his hold on the other's hand. The younger noticed and let out a chuff, his fingers shaking slightly as he held the other's hand back. It might be a bit for Bayako to bounce back. Then best get some rest. Planning on it. Ryunosuke nods his head and brings up the other's hand to rest a kiss. I'll come back tomorrow, he said. Think they'll let you bring 𝐒𝐭𝐲? Atsushi asks with a light smile. Possibly, I'll go check with them. He leans over to press one on the other's forehead. Now rest, Atsushi hums, smiling quietly and closing his eyes. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 waited for a moment longer, hearing the slight change in their breathing, and turned around to leave the room, turning the lights off completely. Thankfully, the bed was the furthest one in the room, allowing Atsushi to bask in the sunlight. Akutagawa-san. He turns around in time from closing the door to see Midoriya greet him with Todoroki, Uraraka, Asui, Eda, and Kirishima. How's Nakajima-san? He asks, hopeful. Awake. Finally, 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 answered. But don't celebrate too quickly. He's exhausted beyond belief, and he can't tap into his quirk right now. Are you saying? Uraraka dreads instantly with the rest of the work-study students. No, shakes 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴's head. Bayako has overexerted herself in protecting Eri from the day Jinko went missing to the day of our case. But that was at least a week, Kirishima exclaims, which is why Jinko's exhausted. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 sighs heavily, rubbing his temples. I've already informed the others about the situation, although they've likely seen it on the news. Understandable, have a nice day. Kirishima nods. Wait, Midoriya exclaims, and the Ravenet looks at him. Do you think you two can attend the school festival? He asks, hopeful. We'd be pushing it. You've already invited Eri for her to experience this, but me and Jinko are trusted detectives for UA. Uraraka's eyes sparkling. Jinko is, I'm anything but. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 waved a dismissive hand, but looking at their hopeful eyes, he sighs. I'll speak with Nezu about it, hopefully with Jinko. What is this festival about? He asks. Basically, it's a festival held here in UA only accessible to its students. While the sports festival was for students in the hero course, this one is for the other courses. Midoriya explains. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 was silent for a moment before he sighed. And you want Jinko and me to see it? Yeah, or at least try to. He's likely never been to a school festival since he's never been to school, and maybe you, too. The Ravenet stares at the boy for a moment longer before sighing heavily. Concert, what do you think? 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 gave the boy a deadpan stare. You don't need my input. This is a decision you make amongst your class, not me or Atsushi. A beat. But he would be quite fascinated to see you kids on a stage and enjoying yourselves. Midoriya blinks before grinning brightly. Right. In fact, that's the entire purpose of this festival, to get rid of those nerves since all those disasters lately. Good choice. Then I won't bother you kids about it. Oh, you're leaving, Ruachin? Yaoyorozu blinks in surprise. I've overstayed my welcome for several nights straight due to my stress. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 rests his hands in his coat pocket. Understandable stress, though. Hagakure calls. Even so, it's best that I leave you kids to focus on this event. But don't be surprised when we come around to check up on you kids. Of course. Yaoyorozu smiles and 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 smiles slightly back, nodding his head in turn. Atsushi pulls over a white silver plaid button-up shirt and just manages to catch a jacket tossed to him. Ready? 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 inquires, Rashomon picking up a bag. Atsushi hums, pulling back his sleeves. He pauses, looking at the black stripes apparent on his arms, as well as his sharpened nails. If he were to guess also, his eyes changed. It wouldn't be long before his ears and tail would manifest themselves. Tonight's a full moon, he remarks. It will be, nods 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴. Seems like whatever happened, it broke off my connection to Fukuzawa-san's ability. Atsushi hums quietly before sighing heavily. Even then, I still can't tap into Bayako. Maybe I have to let this happen to try and talk to her. He picks himself up from the side of the bed with a slight stagger. They both walked out of the room and went to check out at the lobby. Where do we go next? 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 asks. If I could, I need to speak to Nezu about a few things. Atsushi said. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 nods his head understandingly as they exit the hospital. The school's busy with a festival currently. A school festival. Atsushi's pupils enlarge into orbs and 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 smirks slightly at the sight before nodding his head. For the kids of the other courses, all the classes are busy preparing for their events. Your kids are doing a big concert for theirs. It truly was a sight once they got to the gates of UA. Whoa, Atsushi whispers, his eyes flickering to all the stands and events. His gaze sharpens, and he cranes his head to look through the glass. There, he sees Nezu watching. And he waves over. The principal notices and waves back. He knows we're here. Come on. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 nods and they make their way through the school. As Atsushi was getting distracted by the decorations and the bustle, 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 guided him along with Rashomon wrapped around his wrist. Greetings, you two. Nezu smiles, walking up to them. Hello. Atsushi smiles. Glad to see you bouncing back. Nakajima, we heard what happened regarding Shy Hasekai. And I also heard about the idea of bringing Eri to see the festival. Good choice. Atsushi smiles as they follow them into their office. Really, it was more of Midoriya's idea. He said, who knew? He murmurs, I figured. 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝐴 lightly knocks the other's head. He takes after your thoughtfulness. Atsushi sheepishly smiles before looking back. Right, I came here to talk to you about some things. Yes, the first is, after some thinking and some talks with my folks, I think I've deduced who this third party, or who you all call them, the traitor. 𝗵𝗃 raises an eyebrow at him. When? Atsushi lightly scratched his cheek. Before my kidnapping. 𝗵𝗃 stares at him before sighing heavily. Why am I not surprised? So who do you think they are? Nezu inquires. One of Class 1A's kids, Yuga Aoyama. But in the sense, all for one blackmailed him and his family. If he were to go against his word, all of them would be in danger of getting killed. Atsushi relays. My, what the stakes for such a young student, sighs Nezu. Then what shall we do about this situation? He inquires. Don't expel him. Atsushi answers simply. All for one has been apprehended and is still locked up back home in Yokohama. But for the sake of the public and likely for the school body, it's best that you relocate his family closer to keep a close eye on them on the surface, but to ensure their safety. Wana is like a big family, and I could tell that Yuga really enjoys their company, but can't seem to really enjoy himself with this burden. Nezu thinks about it for a moment and looks at Atsushi for a moment longer. 𝗵𝗃 glances at his husband before adding in, 𝗵𝗂 is incapable of lying. Even though Yuga is the traitor, he and his family are also victims in this situation. Nezu looks at them before smiling. Then that's what we shall do. We'll inform the family regarding this after the festival, and hopefully they'll agree to moving closer to the school for the sake of their safety. He tilted his head. And what else? Atsushi pauses for a moment and thinks for a moment. Likely a few days after the festival, I'll be returning back home to Yokohama permanently. Immediately he adds, but this has nothing to do with the situation of Shai Hasekai, promise. The kids got through their exams, 2 are currently redoing it, but with that comes to new additions of heroes, their newest generation. I'm confident that they can handle themselves, along with the current police force. They aren't as secretive and corruptive compared to Yokohama's. 𝗵𝗃 agrees. I see. Nezu smiles. Well, I must thank you for all that you've done for UA and Musutafu City. Atsushi bows his head and turned before tiger ears suddenly appear and he whipped his head elsewhere. What was that? Class 1A's concert in the gym. Nezu answers. Instantly Atsushi's eyes sparkled as he looked at the principal. If you like, you too can enjoy the festival with the students. He offers. Thank you, sir. Atsushi grins before taking 𝗵𝗃's hand and dragging him off. Nuo, I missed it. Atsushi wallows while 𝗵𝗃 gently patted his back. Nakajima-san. Rashomon helps the other up in time to get tackled by all sides. You're okay. Don't scare us like that again. Are you okay? You've been recently discharged from the hospital, right? You're here at the festival. Atsushi smiles nervously at their voices overlapping, but one stood out to him. Byako. Atsushi looks past the students' heads to Sayuri, large ruby-red eyes sparkling and in awe of the young man. He stares as the students all let go, letting Atsushi walk over and kneel before the girl. You're smiling, he whispers in wonder, kneeling before the girl. Then a brighter smile, you're smiling. Look at you, Uri-chan. Atsushi cries, picking her up and twirling her around in the air. And she laughs just so brightly and hugs him tightly when he pulls her close again. I'm so glad, he whispers. 𝗵𝗃 watches the sight with the students and blinks to see the tail and ears vanish, his stripes also receding back, an echoed chuff coming from the young man as he lightly headbutts the girl who giggled in turn. He smiles quietly at the sight and sighs. Do you kids need help cleaning up? Atsushi asks. Yes, please. What's going to happen to Iri after she's stable enough to be officially discharged from the hospital? Atsushi found himself wondering out loud, not really expecting an answer as he sat before a window in UAS main building. We haven't decided yet. The detective flinches and looks over his shoulder to see Aizawa at the door. Since the kids trust you, what do you think? He asks, joining next to him. Atsushi stares at the man before turning his head to the windows overlooking the dorms. Gosh, this is hard. You folks of Musutafu have it different for how it's like in Yokohama. He presses his hand over his face, pushing his bangs back and thinks for a moment. Definitely not an orphanage. They wouldn't know how to handle her quirk and give her the right training to have her control it. Atsushi instantly says. Aizawa looks at him for a moment before humming. And she can't live in the hospital forever. It might make her feel like she's trapped again. Does she have any family? He asks. Only one, but he's been in a coma for some time. Aizawa said. Atsushi thinks for a moment before his phone chimes. Pulling it out, he sees the others spamming their group chat for the big dinner happening in a few days and celebrating Atsushi and 𝗵𝗃 returning back home. He smiles at the sight before humming in thought. Then why not take care of her here in UA? He asks. Aizawa looks at him in slight shock before resuming back to a nonchalant expression. What makes you suggest that? Atsushi hums and leans back, looking off to the distance. Take this as my last bout of wisdom before I return back to Yokohama. Iri has no conscious family left, and with the nature of her quirk, she would need someone to help train her, but also take care of her if it does run out of control. he explains. Not to mention, you and those work-study kids act like pillars to her, people that changed her life. If she were to be sent to an orphanage, it would risk her mental state and remind her of her time with 𝗧𝗧𝗪. Without realizing, he hugged his legs. You guys were the best things to ever happen in her life. What better way for her to continue having a good life than be with the people that brought her into the light? Aizawa gazes at him for a moment before looking out the window. I see. Are you speaking from experience? Atsushi smiles quietly. Rather, I'm speaking from what I wished could happen to me. With a sigh, he picks himself up and stretches his arms over his head. Anyways, I'll leave you be. Still gotta pack up things in the apartment. Aizawa watches him leave. And after a moment since the door closed, he blinks. Pack, Nakajima-san. Yes, Midoriya-kun. Do you think we reached friendship level 5 to learn about your quirk? Atsushi looks over to see all the students looking at him with large sparkly eyes, Eri and the big three alongside them. They've come to the open area where they used to spar or simply hang out, long before the school had added the dorms. Almost like one last gathering before they resume with video calls with few in-person visits. Atsushi stares at them and looks at Ryunosuke, who in turn looks back. Are you sure? He asks, hesitant. Sure, we're sure. Ashido grins, Zero nodding his head in agreement. Have trauma endurance 100. Ryunosuke questions. That got some sheepish glances. Atsushi chuckles and hums in thought. For the first 18 of my years, I grew up in an orphanage just outside Yokohama City, unknowing of my quirk sleepwalking. Atsushi starts, leaning back on his arms and staring at the bright blue skies. It was harsh, being in that orphanage. I was most picked on by the other kids and victim to the workers' punishments if we got out of line. What kind? Todoroki asks. Atsushi stares before smiling quietly and tapping his left eye. Instantly the boy knew and settled back. When I turned 18, I was kicked out and almost starved, surviving on the streets for 2 weeks since. Gosh, Yokohama's different. Zero utters and Atsushi just grins. Thought I was gonna starve to death, until I found myself diving into a river to save a man trying to drown himself. Who? 𝗧𝗪𝗧-san, Atsushi said with a straight face before continuing. That's the same night I realized I was the white tiger they were looking for, 𝗧𝗪𝗧-san and Kunikida-san. I wasn't told that I had a quirk, beast beneath the moonlight. Byako. Eri tilts her head. Atsushi smiles, nodding his head. Byako. She caused a bit of trouble, and I didn't help with the fact that I kept on wandering from city to city. And next thing I knew, I woke up with the knowledge I had a quirk, and was whisked off to be the newbie detective of the armed detective agency with a bounty on his head. A bounty. Atsushi grins mischievously as he giggled menacingly, leaning back on Ryunosuke, who rolled his eyes and got Rashomon to nip the other's cheek, causing the detective to shriek. What about you, Akutagawa-san? Midoriya asks. Is knowing that I'm his husband not enough? Don't forget our conversation that one morning. Bakugo reminds him. Ryunosuke frowned and sighed begrudgingly. Survived in the slums with Jin until I was 16. 𝗧𝗪𝗧-san picked me up and brought us to the Port Mafia and grew up working in the Port Mafia. He answered vaguely, but with a gesture to Atsushi. And then foolish Jinko showed up to Yokohama. And then I showed up. Atsushi grins, pointing at himself. Dang, Yokohama really is something. Zero comments. Well, Yokohama's Yokohama. It's very different but similar to you folks here in Musutafu. Atsushi hums before glancing at them. What brought this up, actually? Instantly the students all glance away, averting their gazes. Atsushi raises an eyebrow. We heard that you were leaving soon. Midoriya explained sheepishly. So you've heard. Atsushi hums. Yeah, I am. But it's not because of the recent stuff. That kidnapping was at least an 8.5 compared to previous attempts. He waved off their startled expressions while Ryunosuke face-palmed. You kids are the new generation of heroes. I trust you kids can manage yourselves, along with your police force. I can barely trust Yokohama's, so you guys already have a point in that. Will you come visit us? Eri asks. Of course, maybe with others, too. Atsushi smiles. They'll adore you. He pets her head. That we do. Atsushi flinches and whips his head to see quite the crowd standing at the entrance into the sparring area. Hey, he blinks. Hey, why sound so shocked, Atsushi? Ranpo asks. What are you? The other stammered. It's a day trip, Kayuka said, taking another bite out of her crepe. Is that so? Atsushi nervously smiles and the other nods her head. That, and we want to meet your little kiddos. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 smiles innocently, but Chuya smacks him over the head with a sigh. You just want to annoy them. You can trick Atsushi-kun all you want. He's learned all your tricks. Shibui's mean. They opted to ignore the two bickering. And Lucy, Sigma, and Kayuka found themselves looking at Eri, who looked back at them. Welcome to the club. Sigma smiles, holding up a small bag. Eri's eyes sparkled and she takes the bag from him while Mirio tilts his head. Club? What kind of club? He asks, confused. Got saved by a certain cat-like detective club, Lucy said. I quote him a tiger. Yeah, I can't hear your yowling. Tiger cat, she teases, and Atsushi just grumbled in defeat. Face it, lad. You're not escaping the cat allegations, 𝐒𝐻𝑢 said, patting her head while Yasano rightfully kicked 𝗵𝗲. Saved by Nakajima-san. Tamaki blinks. Not just us three, Sigma said, helping open the bag and handing it back to Eri, Dazai, and Akutagawa-san. They stared at him and looked over as Atsushi was talking with his folks. I can see it, smiles Hato. Man, our family's fucked. Talia guffawed. Todoroki staring at him in shock and more or less shaking him to make sure that he's actually real. Two other siblings that stood on either sides of their father. One brother that ran away from home, became a criminal executive, then joined the hunting dogs, and the other faked their death and proceeded to join the League of Villains. Ranpo lists. Why the League of Villains, though? Todoroki asks, confused. Where else could I have gone? Talia questions. Almost instantly everyone gestures to the mafiosi, including themselves. We're literally the Port Mafia. Port Mafia. If your brother can sneak off from Musutafu and wound up in Yokohama, you could have, too. Takahara exclaims. We also have the brain cells, Mori adds. And the benefits, Jin writes on a whiteboard. Really? Show me, Talia said. Oh, Arahabaki, you made a mistake. Atsushi hisses, scrambling and hiding behind Midoriya. What? It couldn't be that bad, could it? Talia asks and turns back to see all the mafiosi holding out their salary checks. He takes a single glance with his brother and the other students and instantly they recoil away. What the fuck? He uttered, jaw to the ground. I did join the wrong organization. Told you. 𝗲𝗵𝗃. Guilty. Guilty. Send him to 𝗲𝗏𝗃. Not that place again. Kaminari, Kirishima, Zero, and Ashido looked between Jin and Yaoyorozu, humming. Black long hair, similar colored eyes. Jin-san, can you tie your hair up by chance? The Ravenette blinks before gathering her hair back, just as it would when she's on the job. They looked between them more. Holy moly, you two do look alike. Zero blinks, except the only difference is that one of you is an assassin. Jin simply smiles innocently. The genes of the Akutagawas and Yaoyorozu stand strong, chuckles Atsushi. And then there's you and Higuchi, comments Ryunosuke snidely. And there's us, agrees the young man, both him and the aforementioned blonde looking defeated. They're both taken. 𝗵𝗲 exclaims, devastated, and in response, Jin expertly kicked him to a nearby tree and a dagger created by Yaoyorozu pinning his shirt deep in the bark. His classmates cheered while Jin and Yaoyorozu smiled at each other while Ryunosuke smirked proudly. That's my sisters. We do seem to have similar quirks, Ryunosuke hums, letting Rashomon out to peer at Dark Shadow. But in my sense, I would be similar to that hero of yours. Genist, not to mention, Rashomon has my physique. He pulls out his phone and shows the student the ability, a green fog mostly clouding its camera. But would Nakajima-sen be similar to Tiger or either Mirko and Hawk? Todoroki asks. None. Nakajima-sen can control his quirk that it doesn't change his person but rather transforms it for a short period. Midoriya shakes his head. I don't like the energy between those two, shuddered Takahara. Let them cook, smirked Teruko smugly. The pot's too hot, turn down the fire. But there's no fire. An expression, little brother. Talia ruffles Todoroki's head. Actually, who else here has similar quirks? Atsushi wonders, looking around. Shibai and Uraraka-chan. Gravity. Dazai merrily smiles, pushing the gingerhead to the girl who blinks. Chuya just sighs and, as his person glows a red ominous glow, he is not floating overhead. Whoa, she exclaims in surprise. Anyone with strength. Kirishima grins. Ooh, I have that. Kenji beams and trots over. Kirishima blinks. And upon looking at the rest, they nod vigorously while having more flashbacks on their expressions, all while Chuya was laughing and Teku looking proud. Dazai can nullify quirks, so he's similar to Aizawa-san. Ryunosuke relays. Mirio could phase through walls. Tamaki adds, motioning to his friend. Seems like ours is somewhat similar, then. Jouno hums. Kyoyuka and Kuyu glanced at each other and both summoned their phantoms, who promptly pinned 𝗵𝗲 once more as his classmates awe at the two quirks' prowess. Midoriya yells out and finds himself on the ground, grumbling. And another win to Atsushi-kun. Done by a well-known move by yours truly, Kinikita-kun, smiles Dazai. I have been training to learn my quirk. I've fought and won against literal villains, and yet I still can't beat Nakajima-san. Midoriya utters in defeat while Atsushi chuckles. If you would like, how about a fight between me and Jinko? Smirked Ryunosuke. No, we can't. We're in public unfortunately. Atsushi shakes his head as he helps Midoriya up. Better than a boat at least, Aya deadpanned. Can we please stop bringing up the boat? Atsushi hisses. Seriously though, when the two of you are on a boat, that's just a signal for danger. Chuya said. It's not our fault. Atsushi complained. It was the first time, Kyoyuka comments, letting Eri try some of Ranpo's candy. That was because there was no truce and we were on a moving cargo ship. Ryunosuke glared. Still a boat, shrugs the girl. The two just duck their heads in defeat while the students dully note to not plan any trips regarding boats if they intend on inviting the two. Chuya quietly stared at Eri who stared back in slight confusion. Everyone nearby watched the two, a bit confused. What's going on? Asui whispers to 𝗧𝗧𝗏. The brunette was quiet, gazing at them. Just similar minds thinking alike. He waves a hand. Next thing they knew, Chuya gently pulled Eri into a hug and glared at the rest. I've only known Eri for half a day, but if anything happens to her I will unleash 𝗲𝗏𝗥. He threatens. At least do it when I'm nearby, 𝗓𝗏. Can't have you die on me now. Oh, shut up. 𝗲𝗏𝗥. Midoriya squeaks. Best you don't know, kid. Atsushi pats the boy's head. Simply put, the full extent of my quirk than just gravity manipulation. That's not even the name of my quirk, it's upon the tainted sorrow, Chuya said, gently playing with Eri's hands as she giggled. Terrifying, whispers Uraraka, almost in awe. You caught a bullet with your teeth. The students all gape as Atsushi just nervously smiles. Several times, in fact. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 inputs with a cheeky smile. Look, I gotta make up for the fact that I don't land on my feet or just land. Another point as to why I deny I have the cat allegations. Atsushi reminds them. Still cat-like to us, Yasano giggles. Our resident office cat. Tanizaki smiles, clapping his hands together. He attracts the nearby strays, agrees Fukuzawa. Not you too. Atsushi grumbles in defeat, flopping over. Bayako literally headbutted Eri the moment you saw her back at the school festival. Ryunosuke pointed out. Hush you. No tiger for a week, all of you. Atsushi screeches and instantly there is outrage. Not only from the framework, but also the student body as well. Which isn't fair, in Atsushi's opinion. You guys are already making plans for day trips and getting-togethers. Atsushi blinks in surprise, seeing Teruko, Jouno, Jin, and Kunikita making plans with the kids. For the sake of my sanity and my schedule, yes, Kunikita said, exasperated. We have game nights, our weekly dinners, and much more, boy. Kuyu reminds him, tapping his head. Atsushi hums in thought for a moment before blinking. I might as well ask Inko-san when she's free so that I can fulfill her promise in visiting Yokohama, he murmurs, pulling out his phone. Your mom, Uraraka asks Midoriya, confused. Well, when we first met, he hung out at my apartment for the most part. Both him and my mom sort of got along, also. He explains. She makes killing meals, also. You gotta try her cooking, one of these days. Atsushi calls over. So the ratings changed from PM 𝗧𝗏𝗏's cooking to Inko-san's godly cooking. Chuya asks. Hey, yup, you two are bullies, says Yu. Atsushi smiles to himself as they were all gathered in a quiet subway, waiting for the train to whisk them back to Yokohama. The others' voices echoed amongst the underground, and Atsushi couldn't help but relax, letting his eyes closed. Nakajima-san. He opens his eyes and looks over to Midoriya. You know, kid, I think we've known each other and grown close enough that we can use our given names. Atsushi chuckles. Midoriya instantly goes red in the face before shaking it away and smiling. Thank you for everything, he said. Atsushi blinked in shock as Midoriya continued. If it wasn't for you helping me from the start and giving me the boost of courage I needed to get in UA, I wouldn't know what I would be doing, he said. Atsushi stares at the boy before reaching a hand and resting it on his head, smiling. I think that you would still do some good out here in Musutafu, he says sincerely. Midoriya stares before they turn their heads to the screech of the train coming to a halt. The others all walked in first, Ryunosuke pausing and looking over. Atsushi nods and heads over, his hand slipping from Midoriya's head. Wait, he turned back around at the echoed shout, and found himself getting hugged by everyone. Even Bakugo was getting wrapped into this by his small group of friends. We'll miss you. Come visit us whenever. And don't hesitate to video call us. And don't be a stranger, either, Midoriya said. Atsushi stares before smiling brightly and nodding. A promise then. They soon let go and wave to them as Atsushi climbs on in hand with Ryunosuke. Overhead, the intercom calls. Next station is Yokohama.